Chapter 3690. Fairy Jing's story was naturally Fairy Jing's love story. It sounded very ordinary. The young Fairy Jing met a cultivator she fell in love with. Unfortunately, this cultivator was a Confucian cultivator and not a Taoist cultivator. In the beginning, the Confucian cultivator still insisted on his love and resisted the resistance from his family. Unfortunately, nothing in this world was perfect. After Fairy Jing told him about her bloodline, the Confucian cultivator was completely defeated. In his eyes, the human bloodline was incomparably noble and the bloodline of a Confucian family was incomparable. He couldn't accept that his lover had a demonic bloodline. Fairy Jing looked at the departing figure of the Confucian cultivator and collapsed on the ground. Her heart was incomparably gloomy. However, this decadence only lasted for a moment. When Fairy Jing got up, she was an incomparably strong Taoist cultivator. Moreover, her Tao heart was so firm that it was beyond ordinary. Xiaohua, do you believe in love at first sight? Fairy Jing's face, which had turned pale because of the opening of her scar, was now somewhat flushed. Xiaohua nodded. He unconsciously thought of Fairy Hong Xia and even Jiu Xia. I also believe in it. Fairy Jing firmly nodded. However, she immediately became a bit disappointed. However, I also know that emotions that start easily are also easily lost. Love that doesn't sharpen together won't last long. I feel that I can't compare to the love of that female cultivator in your story. Your past life. I didn't have time to participate. As for your future, I don't dare to participate. I don't think. Facing Fairy Jing's confession, Xiaohua bit his lips. He didn't know how to face it and didn't know how to open his mouth. Fortunately, just when Xiaohua was feeling very awkward. Whoosh! A communication talisman unexpectedly flew over, and a voice came from afar. Xiao! Fellow Taoist Xiao, why are you here? Xiaohua hastily got up and said to Fairy Jing with a smile. Fairy Jing, look, this is what this Xiao was talking about before. This Xiao laughed because he saw him. Hee. Fairy Jing felt a bit regretful. After all, she didn't hear Xiaohua's reply. However, if he didn't reply, wouldn't she be more satisfied? Fairy Jing, who had reached the 4th grade of elemental energy, didn't know how she should face Xiaohua's reply. When Fairy Jing raised her head, she saw a young man in scholarly robes flying over from the distance. The young man had a pleasant smile on his face. Who else could this young man be but Fu Jiwen? When Fu Jiwen saw Xiaohua's Pegasus and flying chariot, he naturally knew that Xiaohua was on the chariot. However, he didn't rashly release his divine sense. When he flew closer, he saw that there was also a female cultivator on the flying chariot. He swept his divine sense and involuntarily cast a spell. However, he couldn't help but be shocked. This female cultivator's cultivation was actually unfathomable. How could he not know that this female cultivator was a Tao sect senior? When Fu Jiwen flew closer, he immediately bowed and respectfully said, Junior Fu Jiwen greets Senior. Get up! Fairy Jing flicked her sleeves and smiled. I hope that fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't mind. You should address him as an equal. Little friend Fu, there is no need to be so polite. Hearing Fairy Jing's words, Fu Jiwen was even more shocked. When he first met Xiaohua, although Xiaohua displayed his invincible might and charged into the Copper Pillar Nation's Imperial Academy alone, Xiaohua's cultivation was only around the middle of the 3rd grade. It had only been a few years. How could Fu Jiwen believe that even Fairy Jing was inferior to him? However, Fu Jiwen used a spell to probe again. Just like before, he couldn't see through Xiaohua's cultivation at all. Little friend Fu, don't look. Even I can't see through fellow Taoist Zhao's cultivation. Fairy Jing naturally noticed Fu Jiwen's spell and smiled. Even an early nascent soul cultivator became his disciple. What do you think his cultivation is? Xiaohua looked at Fu Jiwen's shocked face and said self-deprecatingly, A few years ago, This Xiao took the initiative to ask someone to become his disciple. Someone even made excuses. Fu Jiwen's face suddenly turned red. Wasn't this talking about him? Xiao. Senior Xiao. Fu Jiwen didn't dare to call Xiaohua fellow Taoist anymore. He whispered, "Why is Senior here?" He. Xiaohua laughed. "Come up and talk. You've seen this heavenly horse before." Aoo. The heavenly horse neighed and wagged its tail intimately at Fu Jiwen, as if it understood Xiaohua's words. "Yes, sir." Fu Jiwen obediently got on the flying carriage and stood respectfully at the side. "You still remember Xiao Jian, right?" Xiaohua knew that he would never see that unrestrained scholar in front of him again, so he asked with a smile. Fu Jiwen nodded. "Junior knows." Junior's impression of him is not very good. Junior had told Senior before. "Yes." Xiaohua nodded. "This old man wants to help the princess of the Jiang country establish a country. This Xiao Jian is one of the people this old man will rely on in the future. Therefore, after this old man obtained the Imperial Master's lot at the Jade Pavilion meeting, I came to the Dan Liang country accompanied by Fairy Jing to investigate Xiao Jian's background." "Then, what was the result?" Fu Jiwen looked at Xiaohua's face, as if he had already understood something, but he still asked, "What else could it be?" Xiaohua shook his head slightly. "This old man is very disappointed. I hope this matter will not affect Senior's wish to establish a Dao sect." Fu Jiwen glanced at Fairy Jing and said in a low voice, "Haha, it doesn't matter." Xiaohua laughed. "This old man has already dealt with it, so there shouldn't be any mistakes. On the other hand, this old man remembers that you should be from the Yu province's Pingshan country. Why did you suddenly come here?" Fu Jiwen bit his lips slightly and said, "Junior used to be from the Yu province's Pingshan country, but now and in the future, I will no longer be from the Pingshan country, nor will I be a disciple of the Fu family." "Oh? Why?" Xiaohua was surprised. "Could it be that you were expelled from the family?" "That's right." Fu Jiwen sighed deeply. "Right now, this junior is cultivating in a hut not far away." "For your wife?" Xiaohua also looked at Fairy Jing, hesitated for a moment, and asked in a low voice, "Then, why did you build a hut here?" "I won't hide it from the two seniors, that's right," Fu Jiwen said with a bitter smile. "Back then, I went against my father's order and swore that I would grow old with my wife, which provoked the family's anger. However, the old housekeeper always mediated, so the family didn't send down any lightning. The old housekeeper passed away last year, and this junior no longer had any protection in the family. My father gave a restriction that if I wanted to protect my wife, I would be expelled from the family, and if I wanted to stay in the family, I would have to abandon my wife." "What an infatuated man!" Fairy Jing praised. After thinking for a moment, she took out a magic treasure from her Qiankun bag and handed it to Fu Jiwen, saying, "This is something I obtained in my early years. I'll give it to you today." "Thank you, Senior." Fu Jiwen knew that a nascent soul cultivator's magic treasure was extraordinary, so he hurriedly received it and bowed to thank her. "If this item is refined by a male and female cultivator together, it will have unexpected effects," Fairy Jing said with a smile. "Yes, this junior understands," Fu Jiwen said with a bitter smile. "Unfortunately, this junior can't ask my wife to come out and thank Senior." "Oh? Little friend Fu, what do you mean?" Fairy Jing was slightly taken aback. Fu Jiwen said respectfully, "Seniors, please don't be impatient. This junior should have reported this matter to Senior Xiao long ago. Seniors, please follow this junior to the hut, and this junior will explain it in detail." "All right." Xiaohua patted the Pegasus, and the flying carriage rushed to the place where Fu Jiwen came from. Not long after, they arrived at a tall mountain range. A small, simple house made of poplar wood was erected on a slightly shady foothill. "Seniors, please." Fu Jiwen got off the flying carriage first and respectfully invited Xiaohua and Fairy Jing inside. Xiaohua smiled and put away the flying carriage and Pegasus. He entered the wooden house first, and saw that the interior of the house was very simple. Apart from the praying mat, there were some scrolls. The scrolls were a bit messy, and it seemed that Fu Jiwen's cultivation was very difficult. Fairy Jing looked around and glanced at Xiao Hua in surprise. Because there was no trace of a second cultivator in the wooden house, Fairy Jing didn't know where the wife Fu Jiwen mentioned was. After the two sat down, Fu Jiwen took out some spirit fruits from his small cosmos pouch and respectfully handed them over. He then said with a smile, "Didn't Senior Xiao ask before? The reason why this junior built a hut here is very simple. It's because this junior first met his wife here. Hee, so that's how it is." Xiao Hua smiled and picked up the spirit fruit. He tasted it and said, "Then the memories here must be very beautiful." "It's not that beautiful," Fu Jiwen said with an embarrassed smile. The situation at that time was very strange and almost scared this junior to death. With that, Fu Jiwen carefully took out a fist-sized wooden box from his bosom. Xiao Hua saw the wooden box clearly. It was the thunder amplification wood that he gave to Fu Jiwen at the auction in Jai Xinglu that day. Xiao Hua's heart moved and he became pensive. Sure enough, Fu Jiwen took out a wooden box made of thunder amplification wood and carefully opened it. Inside the wooden box, there was a fist-sized odd-shaped jade crystal. The jade crystal was suffused with rays of multicolored light. Lines of multicolored inscriptions flowed on the surface of the jade crystal like chains. Layers of lightning mist floated on these inscriptions. Heaven's punishment prison crystal? When Fairy Jing saw this item, her face showed surprise. She let out a low cry as if she had seen something terrifying. Heaven's punishment prison crystal? Xiao Hua frowned and carefully thought about it. It was as if he had never seen this item in the scrolls. Fairy Jing glanced at Fu Jiwen with dissatisfaction. She raised her hand to stop Xiao Hua's hand and then transmitted a few words. Sure enough, Xiao Hua's face was a bit strange. -13. Chapter 3691. On the other hand, Fu Jiwen blinked, not understanding what Fairy Jing was talking about. He then looked at Xiao Hua and Fairy Jing in surprise and awkwardly put away the wooden box in his hand. Hearing Fairy Jing's words, Xiao Hua stared into Fu Jiwen's eyes and kindly asked, "Fu Jiwen, do you know that this is a Heaven's Punishment prison crystal?" "Reporting to Senior, this junior doesn't know," Fu Jiwen honestly replied. Fairy Jing sneered. "Even if you don't know, does your family not know?" But at this point, Fairy Jing seemed to realize something and shook her head. "This old one understands. As the saying goes, knowing the law and breaking the law adds 3 levels of punishment. If you don't know that this is a Heaven's Punishment prison crystal, even if the Immortal Palace's law enforcers catch you, your punishment won't be too strict. This is your Fu family protecting you. The Immortal Palace's law enforcers?" Fu Jiwen's face instantly paled. Although he didn't know what a Heaven's Punishment prison crystal was, he knew what a law enforcer was. After a while, he said in a low voice, "My Fu family is originally a small family in the peaceful mountain country. We might not be as knowledgeable as Senior and might not know the origin of this item. Perhaps." Fairy Jing saw that Fu Jiwen didn't seem to be faking it and said thoughtfully, "Since you really don't know the origin of this item, then you didn't purposely lead the disaster to Xiao Hua. This old one misunderstood." "Haha," Xiao Hua laughed. "Fairy Jing is overthinking. This Xiao and Fu Jiwen can be considered friends in times of trouble. He wouldn't have any dirty thoughts. It doesn't matter whether he has it or not." Fairy Jing glanced at the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal floating in the clouds and said indifferently, "If this old one encounters this item of Heaven's Punishment, I will definitely throw it away immediately. The farther the better." "No," Fu Jiwen said resolutely. "This junior's wife is inside. This junior will never abandon her." Fairy Jing narrowed her eyes. She looked at Xiao Hua and said in a warm voice, "Actually, although fellow Taoist Xiao hasn't said anything yet, I presume fellow Taoist already has a plan in mind? This matter is Fu Jiwen's private matter. All the decisions are in his hands." Xiaohua similarly did not hesitate as he spoke with a grin. That's true. Fairy Jing nodded. She turned to look at Fujiwen and said, Fujiwen, I can see that you're an infatuated person, so why don't you say a few more words? The decision is still in your hands. Fairy Jing pointed at the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal and explained. The Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal, as the name suggests, is a punishment from the heavens. It imprisons those who break the law within 3 inches of heaven and earth. Confucian cultivators had a painted ground as a prison, and this was the case when they refused to make any progress. This punishment is one of the methods the Celestial Palace uses to punish those who break the laws of the Celestial Palace. The sinner is imprisoned in the crystal and can't cultivate, talk to others, or see others. The sinner's entire world is a 3-inch well. It's worse than being a frog in a well. Moreover, during the imprisonment, there will be divine lightning from the heavens every day to destroy their body and soul. It's said that the suffering inside is unbearable for ordinary people. I see. This junior understands. Fujiwen's eyes were filled with tenderness. He was very grateful for Fairy Jing's explanation. Fairy Jing continued. Above the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal is the law chain of the Celestial Palace. Without the jade seal of the Celestial Palace, it can't be unlocked. Only at the end of the punishment will the law chain be unlocked. Anyone who dares to try to break it will be seen as going against the Celestial Palace and violating the laws of the heavens. If the punishment is light, the Celestial Palace will send celestial soldiers to encircle them. If the punishment is heavy, the Celestial Palace will send law enforcers to the lower realm to kill them. At this point, Fairy Jing paused again and looked deeply at Fujiwen. She said warmly, Fujiwen, you are infatuated with your wife, but she clearly lied to you. She is using you. Yes, since Fujiwen still didn't know this was the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal, it meant that the sinner inside the crystal didn't tell Fujiwen the truth. The Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal was such an important punishment that even Fairy Jing knew about it. How could the sinner not know? If she didn't tell Fujiwen, wouldn't she be pulling Fujiwen into this whirlpool? Who would have thought that when Fujiwen heard this, his eyes would be filled with deep emotions? He bowed respectfully and said, Senior, thank you for your concern for me. Things are not as you think. My wife did not deceive me. She even asked me to throw away the Heavenly Punishment Prison Crystal. But I really couldn't bear to do so. It was all my own doing. Oh? Fairy Jing was a bit confused. She also knew that this matter was a bit strange. According to what she knew, the sinner inside the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal couldn't communicate with the outside world. The sinner didn't even know where they were. Even if they fell into an abyss, even if they encountered a landslide and the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal was buried underground, the sinner inside wouldn't be able to escape. She didn't know how Fujiwen contacted the sinner inside and even called her his wife. That's strange. Tell me about it. However, Fairy Jing suddenly realized something and hurriedly waved her hand. Wait, it's better not to talk about this. Fairy Jing said to Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist Xiao, this matter involves the law of the Celestial Palace. It's not something that Taoist cultivators like us can come into contact with. Even a first-rate scholarly cultivator clan would probably avoid it if they were to encounter it. Hee. How could Xiaohua, who had even killed the Hall Master of Star-Lord Hall, be afraid of this? Especially Fujiwen, who he admired a lot. Xiaohua smiled faintly and said, Fairy Jing, don't be afraid. Let's listen first. I'm very curious. What kind of law did the woman who made Fujiwen fall in love with her commit? All right. Fairy Jing knew that she couldn't persuade Xiaohua, so she could only nod. Fujiwen carefully put the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal into the wooden box. Looking at the time, he hid it close to his body again. He stood there and explained the whole matter in detail. It was really a sad but beautiful story. As early as a few years ago, Fujiwen traveled to this place. Seeing that the time was late, he rested at the foot of the mountain. When night fell, the stone wall behind Fujiwen suddenly shone with extraordinary splendor. Then, a beautiful woman flew out from the mountain rock. Fujiwen was dumbfounded, and a strange ripple appeared in his heart. The woman was also very happy to see Fujiwen, and she immediately had a long talk with Fujiwen. The woman's name was Worry Cloud, and she was a mountain spirit. However, the woman was very knowledgeable and witty. Fujiwen only chatted with her for an hour, and he immediately regarded her as a celestial being. What made Fujiwen overjoyed was that the woman also had a special liking for him. Under the clear moonlight, the two of them were in love, and the heaven became the quilt, and the earth became the bed. What was even more unexpected to Fujiwen was that after the spring breeze, without waiting for Fujiwen to ask anything, the woman's face immediately changed. She actually turned into a ferocious monster with a ferocious face, and wanted to devour Fujiwen's essence blood. It was also at this moment that the sound of wind and thunder resounded, and a thunderbolt struck the woman until she disappeared without a trace. Fujiwen trembled with fear and didn't dare to stay at the foot of the mountain. He used a technique to escape far away. However, after escaping, Fujiwen couldn't forget the woman for a long time. The woman's lovely appearance and elegant manner of speech had always lingered in his mind. Carefully thinking about everything that happened on that moonlit night, Fujiwen felt that something was wrong. After all, if the woman had the intention to harm him, why would she wait until the end? Not to mention the time when they first appeared, and not to mention the time when the two of them were entangled, the woman's strength seemed to far surpass Fujiwen's. If the woman wanted to devour Fujiwen, it would simply be too easy. After thinking for a long time, Fujiwen, who couldn't forget the woman, finally returned to the foot of the mountain and carefully searched for traces. Unfortunately, the foot of the mountain was desolate. Other than withered branches and mountain rocks, there were no clues at all. Even the absurdity of that night had long drifted away in the mountain wind. After searching for dozens of days and nights without any results, Fujiwen increasingly understood that no result was actually the best result. This meant that the woman was definitely not the mountain spirit she claimed to be, and was definitely not an evil person who wanted to devour the essence blood of others. Therefore, Fujiwen looked at the stone wall that the woman flew out from, and then used his magic power to drill through the stone wall. The cave behind the wooden house was what Fujiwen had done that day. Unfortunately, even though Fujiwen had dug out many passages in the stone wall, he still couldn't find the woman. In the end, Fujiwen even wanted to push down the foot of the mountain layer by layer, but when he thought that this might hurt the depressed woman that he hadn't found, Fujiwen stopped this crazy idea. Very quickly, a year's time had passed. Fujiwen faintly had a connection in his heart. It was as if that day, that moment, the woman in his heart would definitely descend again. He might as well quietly cultivate in the cave and wait for that moment to arrive. Sure enough, on the same day, at the same time, extraordinary splendor reappeared. The woman really did appear. When the woman saw that it was Fujiwen again, besides being shocked, her expression changed greatly. Instantly, a vicious look appeared on her face, and she prepared to kill Fujiwen. Facing the repulsive face, facing the slender hand that wanted to kill him, Fujiwen wore a smile on his face. His eyes were filled with tenderness. He tore open his clothes and presented his bare chest to the woman. The woman was stunned. She actually couldn't do anything. When the woman saw the passage in the stone wall, she cried again. The woman was drunk again. She hugged Fujiwen and didn't let go for a long time. The two who hadn't seen each other for more than a year naturally had sex again. After the romance, the woman's attitude changed again. Although she wasn't as vicious as before, she still warned Fujiwen not to stay here. She also made it clear to Fujiwen that she was a mountain spirit, and was different from ordinary humans. She didn't have any sense of shame or etiquette. Fujiwen wasn't the first man that she had given herself to. She was just lonely and unbearable, so she easily found Fujiwen. -13. Chapter 3692. That night's ending was no different from the first time. After the thunderbolt, the woman disappeared. However, this time Fujiwen was careful and used his divine sense to follow her. However, the moment his divine sense was released, it was immediately destroyed by the thunderbolt. Not only did Fujiwen not find the woman's whereabouts, but he was also injured. Fujiwen was unwilling to admit defeat. He immediately thought hard and used the runes of the Tian Shu in his chest as a guide to seal the areas near the cave and explore one by one. Hard work paid off. After nearly half a year of hard work, Fujiwen finally found an area in the depths of the mountain with faint lightning and found the Tian Fa prison crystal inside. Although Fujiwen didn't know what this thing was, his intuition told him that this thing was the woman named Yutan. Looking at the lightning that would appear from the void above the heaven punishment prison crystal every once in a while, his heart would ache when the lightning landed inside. He could imagine how his lover would be suffering inside. Sure enough, on the same day in the second year, the Tian Fa prison crystal flashed with dazzling clouds. The binding inscriptions on it broke and turned into strokes. Yutan flew out of the clouds. Worry Tan looked at Fujiwen and then at the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal in front of Fujiwen. She sighed slightly and didn't say another unpleasant word. She held Fujiwen's hand and looked at the crescent moon in the night sky. She told him how much she missed him in the past year. The two of them made love to each other until 2 hours were up. The inscriptions on the crystal recast and produced a thunderbolt that pulled the woman into it. The woman didn't mention her origin, let alone what the Tian Fa prison crystal was. Fujiwen brought the Tian Fa prison crystal back from the foot of the mountain. From then on, he regarded the woman as his wife and told this to his parents. Of course, Fujiwen's parents didn't agree. They even threatened to expel Fujiwen from the family and exterminate the mountain spirits. However, just as Fairy Jing had guessed, Fujiwen's parents didn't ask to see the Tian Fa prison crystal and the so-called mountain spirit, Yutan. Fujiwen didn't give in. He took Xiao Rui and the old housekeeper out of the house and made a living alone. In order to help Yutan resist the sky thunder in the void, he went to Zhai Xinglu in the Bronze Pillar country, met Xiao Hua, and obtained the thunder amplification wood. I see. Fairy Jing nodded and said, It seems that this old one has wronged you and Yutan. Your relationship is truly admirable. Unfortunately, you are a cultivator of the mortal world. Your Confucian cultivation base is not high, and you have also mixed Taoist cultivation methods. It is very difficult for you to marry someone from the Immortal Palace. Not to mention that this woman has violated the laws of the Immortal Palace and is a sinner. How can you be with her? Even if you're sneaking around right now, if you're discovered by the law enforcers, you won't be able to keep your lives. I'm afraid that Yutan also knew this. That's why he decided to separate from you. He didn't want you to be implicated. Fairy Jing! Xiao Hua was a little bewildered. Didn't you say that the sinners in the heavenly punishment prison crystal are unable to communicate with the outside world? Why can this sorrow cloud come out for 2 hours every year? I can't answer fellow Taoist Zhao's question. Fairy Jing shook her head. I've only heard rumors and don't know the truth. There might be 2 possibilities. Xiao Hua nodded and said, The first possibility is that the heavenly punishment prison crystal has been in there for too long. The engraved law chains inside have already lost some of their effectiveness. That's why Miss Yutan can come out for 2 hours every year. Hee, this possibility isn't big, Fairy Jing said with a smile. The engraved law chains are made of the Immortal Palace's most authentic engraved law chains. They can absorb the awe-inspiring chi from the heavenly lightning. No matter how long it has been, it can still bind the sinners. Then it's the second possibility, Xiao Hua said with a smile. The engraved law chains of the heavenly punishment prison crystal have been tampered with. Every once in a while, it has to be unlocked for 2 hours to let Miss Yutan come out for a breath of fresh air. And under this possibility, Fairy Jing nodded. Then Miss Yutan's identity is rather interesting. Indeed. Xiao Hua looked at Fujiwen. That Miss Yutan is most likely a member of the Immortal Palace's inner family. She has committed a great crime. Although there is the punishment of the Immortal Palace, there is still someone who can reach out and block some of it for her, Inner family? Impossible, Fairy Jing said with a smile. How could the Empress bloodline be so carelessly left in the hidden immortal continent? I'm afraid she has some relationship with the inner family, a female official, or a side branch of the Empress. However, judging from this woman's scheming, it's more likely that she's a female official. Scheming? Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. Soon after, he understood a little. Disregarding everything else, this woman had been with Fu Jiwen for so many years without revealing any of her background. It was impossible for an ordinary woman to do that. It doesn't matter who she is. Fu Jiwen didn't care. He smiled and said, "Since this junior believes that she is my wife, this junior will stay with her for a lifetime." A lifetime? That's your lifetime. Fairy Jing sneered. Even if you turn into a skeleton, that woman will still live well. Unless, you can cultivate to the 9th grade of essence energy. To be able to have such a wife, this junior is already satisfied. Fu Jiwen seemed to have steeled his heart. He turned a deaf ear to Fairy Jing's reminder. Forget it. Either way, it's your own matter. Xiaohua smiled. You can decide for yourself. 2 seniors came at the right time. In a dozen or so days, Worry Tan will come out. If 2 seniors are willing, this junior would like to invite seniors to see her. Fu Jiwen thought for a moment and asked with an earnest expression. Aside from the old housekeeper, no one has seen her yet. No need. Fairy Jing refused very simply. This old one has other matters to attend to with fellow Taoist Xiao. Xiaohua faced Fu Jiwen's earnest gaze and said to Fairy Jing, Since we're already here, why don't you wait for a few more days? Fairy Jing didn't know which heartstring had been touched. She shook her head and said, This concubine doesn't want to get involved in this kind of trouble. Of course, if fellow Taoist Xiao wants to stay, this concubine will go there myself. Fairy Jing got up and walked out of the wooden house. Xiaohua frowned. He felt that Fairy Jing's appearance today was different from before. He nodded to Fu Jiwen and followed her out. Fairy Jing stood in front of the mountain and looked at the golden desert in the distance. She said from the bottom of her heart, Xiaohua, everything about you is good, except for one thing. Your heart is too soft. Previously, at the Jade Pavilion banquet, I saw that you killed decisively. You were the image of an ambitious and ruthless person. That was why I admired you. But along the way, I discovered that what I saw was far from what I imagined. A person like you. Not to mention Sun Kong, even if it was Zhang Daoran, you might not be able to compare. Forget it, let's not talk about this. If you don't want to go, I won't force you. From today onwards, you and I will go our separate ways and be strangers. Oh, before I leave, I'll give you a word of advice. The Immortal Palace. The reason it's called the Immortal Palace is because it's the representative of Confucian cultivators for millions or even tens of millions of years. It's far from what our declining Taoist sects can compare to. Xiaohua frowned and said with a bitter smile, Fairy Jing, how long is the journey from where you want to go? 2 days. Fairy Jing's expression didn't change as she faintly replied, How about this? Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, I can't be someone who doesn't keep his word. I'll accompany Fairy Jing to that place first, and then come back. Hee. Actually, since we're already here, whether you go or not, it doesn't matter. Fairy Jing's misty eyes became even more hazy. Let's go, Xiaohua said to Fu Jiwen in the wooden house and then flew into the air. Fairy Jing didn't say anything. She didn't wait for Fu Jiwen to fly out of the wooden house and flew away. One day later, in the depths of the desert, a strange mountain stood out in the dusk. The mountain was oval in shape and split in the middle. There was a dangerous path leading from the yellow sand to the top of the mountain. At this moment, aside from Fairy Jing and Xiaohua who flew to the mountain and stood in the air, there was a man and woman who were struggling to climb the only path. Seeing Fairy Jing stop, Xiaohua was a bit puzzled. The man and woman weren't cultivators, but they were quite agile and had a foundation in climbing. They should be using the light body cultivation technique. Even so, The almost straight-up mountain path was too difficult for the two of them. Although the two of them did not help each other at the beginning of the climb, when they were halfway up the mountain, the woman was surrounded by danger several times, and the man beside her could not help but lend a helping hand. In the end, when the man was in danger, the woman risked her life to save him. When the two of them escaped danger, what surprised Xiaohua was that the two of them actually held hands and returned from the middle of the mountain. They didn't forget to climb to the top of the mountain. Fairy Jing also stood in the air and stared at the man and woman. She waited until the two of them landed on the ground, then rode 2 horses at the foot of the mountain and left. Only then did she faintly say, "Xiaohua, what do you think this mountain peak looks like?" "A circle." Xiaohua was stunned. He thought for a moment and replied, "2 semicircles. In fact, this is a heart, a broken heart." As Fairy Jing spoke, the corners of her eyes became moist. "Did you see those 2? They were a couple. Although I don't know them, I know that they must have been trapped by love and reached a desperate situation to come to Heartbreak Mountain. The reason why Heartbreak Mountain is in such a remote desert and has such a difficult path is because of the unruffled love water. Anyone who drinks the unruffled love water will forget the person they love the most. There is love in the heavens and love in the world. Although there is unruffled love water in this world, there is no lack of lovers. Heartbreak Mountain was such a desolate place. It was meant to make people think carefully on their way here from the noisy mortal world. Did they need to forget their true love? Did they need to drink a mouthful of water of forgetfulness? The path of Heartbreak Mountain is so difficult to pass. It is also a test to see if people are willing to use life and death to erase the scar in their hearts. The couple just now must have passed the test and couldn't bear to part with each other, so they gave up their earlier impulse and reconciled. -13. Chapter 3693. After she finished talking about the origin of Heartbreak Mountain and the forgotten love water, Fairy Jing held back the tears in her eyes and said with a smile, "I have already told you a story before. Now can you accompany me to the top of Heartbreak Mountain and watch me drink a mouthful of the forgotten love water? Watch as this concubine forgets about that person." See. Xiaohua had an indescribable feeling in his heart. He stared at Fairy Jing and couldn't figure out whether her words were true or false. He vaguely felt that Fairy Jing had feelings for him, but her story clearly didn't mention him. Xiaohua really didn't know what Fairy Jing meant by this. As the saying goes, a man can't guess a woman's thoughts. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua was at a loss when facing Fairy Jing's unfathomable heart. "Perhaps I'm just being paranoid," Xiaohua thought to himself. Then, he followed Fairy Jing and slowly flew up Heartbreak Mountain. He probed in a low voice, "Is there really forgotten love water in this world? Can it really erase the love in a person's heart?" "Of course," Fairy Jing said decisively. "Don't think that this is a desert where not a drop of water exists. Although the forgotten love water on Heartbreak Mountain is only the size of a fist, it can last for tens of thousands of years. There's an ancient saying, 'Hearts are united on Heartbreak Mountain, but the person on Heartbreak Mountain is heartbroken.' It's not a rumor. I've been looking for this place for thousands of years to forget that person. After a while, I drank the forgotten love water. Fellow Taoist Xiao will know when he sees it." "Oh, so that's how it is." Xiaohua suddenly understood. His heart suddenly lightened, but he sighed and said, "AI, it's really hard on Fairy Jing. Actually, sometimes, a true love is a rare memory that doesn't necessarily have to be forgotten. For a male cultivator like fellow Taoist Xiao, it's a beautiful memory. But for female cultivators like me, it might be a disgrace. How can I cultivate when I have to face the unhappiness in my heart every day? The danger of an unstable Tao heart doesn't disappear. I'll tell fellow Taoist Xiao." Fairy Jing smiled sweetly, as if she could really forget that person after drinking the forgotten love water. "Forget it, I'll listen to your decision." Xiaohua knew that for Fairy Jing, forgetting someone was much more realistic than missing someone. This method of severing emotions was the best choice for a cultivator like Fairy Jing. While the two of them were speechless, they had already landed on the peak of Heartbreak Mountain. The mountain peak was not big, only a few 100 feet. There was a deep crack across the mountain peak, which was where the mountain peak had split open. In the center of the crack, there was a stone stool that looked like a wine cup. The stone stool was as tall as a person and was extremely clean. In the center of the stone stool was a heart-shaped groove, and within it, there was a fist-sized spring that flashed with a blood-red color. "Are you sure this Wanqing water is not poisonous?" Xiaohua was a bit worried. He looked at the color of the spring water, and then looked at the setting sun that was only left with a smear of blood red at the edge of the desert. And, at this time, Fairy Jing was really tender. Although she didn't look at Xiaohua, her face that was looking at the setting sun in the distance revealed a kind of deep longing. She then looked at Xiaohua as if she would never recognize him again in the future. Xiaohua smiled and said, "Don't worry. If it's as Fairy Jing said, this Wanqing water can only make you forget the person you love the most, then after drinking the Wanqing water, you will definitely remember this Xiao." This Xiao Shi. Fairy Jing stretched out her white hand, placed it in front of Xiaohua's lips, and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, I still have a very important matter to ask of you." "Oh? Is there any danger?" Xiaohua's heart trembled. "No." Fairy Jing smiled sadly and said, "There is no danger. I just want to ask fellow Taoist Xiao that after I drink the Wanqing water, fellow Taoist Xiao must not tell the story I told you before. Otherwise, all my previous efforts will be wasted." "Don't worry," Xiaohua said with a smile. "When did Fairy tell this Xiao a story? This Xiao seems to have never heard of it." If Xiaohua was joking like this normally, Fairy Jing would have already laughed. But today, Fairy Jing couldn't laugh no matter what. Looking at Xiaohua's smile, and then looking at the Wanqing water in the shadows, 2 drops of sparkling tears flowed out from the corners of her eyes, falling on both sides of her cherry lips. A salty and moist taste came from her mouth. Fairy Jing's tears were like her heart, salty and bitter. "From now on, there will be no distractions in my heart, no emotions to rely on, no heart to rely on, no soul to return to. What can I do when people are in front of me? There is no shadow in my eyes." A journey on the mountain, a journey on the water, the body walks towards the lonely place, the night is deep and the shadow is invisible. The wind blows, the snow blows, the noise shatters my heart's dream, there is no such sound in this world. Fairy Jing chanted in a low voice. Seeing that the sun was setting and the sky was half red, Fairy Jing's delicate body trembled slightly. She opened her mouth, and a stream of water flew out from the heart-shaped groove and fell into her mouth. Just as the forgotten love water touched Fairy Jing's tear-stained red lips, the forgotten love water condensed in the air. Fairy Jing stared at Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, thank you." Then, Fairy Jing closed her eyes and the Wanqing water fell into her mouth. After a while, Fairy Jing opened her eyes and looked around strangely. She touched her damp face and looked at Xiaohua in bewilderment. "You? Who are you? Why do you look so familiar? Where is this?" Xiaohua opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. He had an unimaginable understanding. It was as if heavenly lightning had fallen on his head. At this moment, he finally understood that the person Fairy Jing was talking about wasn't the person in her story, but the person in front of him. Everything before was hidden from him. Fairy Jing's words in front of Fu Jiwen's log cabin were the same as Yutan's words. "This one." Xiaohua originally wanted to introduce himself, but when he thought of what Fairy Jing said a few moments ago, he held back the indescribable feeling in his heart. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist doesn't need to know who I am. It's already late. Fellow Taoist, it's better for you to return early." "Oh, okay." Fairy Jing smiled and cupped her hands. "Although I don't know who you are, I feel very relieved. This one is called Li Jing, and my Buddhist name is Fairy Jing. I'm in charge of a seaside country in a corner of the hidden Immortal continent. If fellow Taoist comes to the seaside that day, you can come to my country for a chat. Goodbye." With that, Fairy Jing urged her magic power, turned into a rainbow, and flew into the distance. Could it be? Xiao Hua watched as Fairy Jing nimbly left. His heart was truly bewildered. He looked at the already withered groove on the stone block and secretly said, Is this really the unruffled love water? The strange water that can make people and cultivators forget the person they love the most? Xiao Hua stretched out his hand as if to test it, but just as he touched the ice-cold stone groove, he hurriedly withdrew his hand. His figure turned into the wind and flew toward Fu Jiwen's log cabin. He really didn't dare to touch the Wanqing water. He didn't want to forget the person he loved the most. Poor Fairy Jing! Suddenly, a voice appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. It was the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua. Even at the last moment, she still refused to say the love in her heart. She still buried it in the deepest part of her heart. Even if she had to bear the burden herself, she didn't want to let someone else be the burden. Actually, fellow Taoist already has a lot of dual cultivation partners. One more Fairy Jing doesn't matter. One less Fairy Jing doesn't matter. Why be so pedantic? Let the world have one more person without love. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to speak, the green-robed Xiao Hua sighed. Alas, what do you know? Xiao Hua said helplessly in his heart. It's not that I don't like Fairy Jing. It's just that I like her. I haven't reached that level of love. You all know about my situation. I already owe others a lot. I don't know if this kind of love will have any results. The less I can, the less I can. Fellow Taoist dares to say that you don't miss her in your heart? Fellow Taoist dares to say that you didn't have any doubts just now? The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua was somewhat unwilling to let it go. If Fairy Jing had said a few more words, perhaps fellow Taoist would have thrown himself into her arms? Perhaps. Xiao Hua knew that he couldn't hide it from these primordial spirits. He could only admit it. However, I still admire Fairy Jing's decisiveness. She's worthy of being a cultivator in charge of a country. Although her cultivation isn't very high, her way of dealing with people is much better than my indecisiveness. She's already at the early nascent soul stage. Her cultivation isn't high? The green-robed Xiao Hua mocked. Taoist Xiao's vision is also very high now. Alas, you all can say whatever you want. Perhaps this is fate. Actually, Xiao Hua's heart was also very uncomfortable. It was as if he had lost something for no reason. His heart was empty. I'll. Suddenly, the green-robed Xiao Hua exclaimed. Interesting. Fellow Taoists, do you feel like your heart is being twisted by a knife? A bit, but fellow Taoists' words are too exaggerated. Xiao Hua's heart moved. He also felt the green-robed Xiao Hua's surprise. Fellow Taoists, do you have something to say? Good. The green-robed Xiao Hua laughed. Now that someone has delivered himself to your door to let you vent your anger, give I another Taoist robe. Who? Xiao Hua was about to release his divine sense when the green-robed Xiao Hua hastily shouted. Don't! If you release your divine sense, won't Taoist Huda run away? Why is Taoist Huda here? Could it be that he also wants to forget the person he loves the most? The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua was also very surprised. Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. He asked, Taoist Huda is coming here. I didn't know, how did you know? Of course it's the result of fellow Taoists stealing. The green-robed Xiao Hua explained. I have been thinking about how to refine Taoist Huda's fire gourd into a sword gourd for the past few days. I still haven't killed the trace of Taoist Huda's primordial spirit in the gourd, so I can sense Taoist Huda's movements within a certain range. At this point, the green-robed Xiao Hua paused for a moment, and said again. Fellow Taoist has already ordered I to refine a spirit treasure. I presume you're also thinking about how to refine your life treasure? -13. Chapter 3694. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. Looking at the desolate Heartbreak Mountain in the night, he sighed and said, Fairy Jing said it well. On Cast Emotion Mountain, one's heart is united, but on Heartbreak Mountain, one's heart is broken. The night on Heartbreak Mountain is truly desolate. Over there. The green-robed Xiaohua pointed in a direction. Xiaohua used the wind evasion technique and flew for a while. Under the guidance of the green-robed Xiaohua, he used the trace concealing technique to hide. Only then did he use his mind to enter his body. He saw that around the tricolored heaven's heart in his dantian, balls of true energy were constantly surging like flames. They seemed to have some spirituality, but if one looked carefully, they would feel that this spirituality was a bit forced, or rather, it was a bit passive. It wasn't the kind of rare spirituality. Looking outside the 5 brocade cloud painting, the endless amount of righteous qi was much more vast than before. The true energy that Xiaohua had bitterly cultivated for who knows how many years had already been condensed into true energy by the 5 brocade cloud painting. There was not a trace of impurities in his dantian. Fellow immortal Confucian cultivator, how do you feel? Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at the scholar's primordial spirit and asked with a smile. The Confucian cultivator Xiaohua waved his hand, and the scroll in his hand turned into countless words. These words turned into birds and fishes or plants. Some of them turned into birds and fishes, and some of them turned into plants, and some of them turned into plants, and they covered the nearby area with green leaves. If fellow Immortal had asked me before the year, I might have proudly shown off to fellow Immortal. Xiaohua indifferently replied. After all, fellow Immortal has been tempering the true energy in your chest for the longest time. After the seal was broken, I worked hard to catch up. Now my strength is close to fellow Immortals. Of course, according to the realm of Confucian cultivators, my cultivation is not worth mentioning. However, fellow Immortal from the Buddhist sect received guidance from Grand Master Ci Xiang and went into seclusion. His thoughts made me feel a lot. Just as fellow Immortal has been pondering, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism have their own strengths. What is the true essence of each sect's cultivation? Perhaps I already know a little bit. Fellow Immortal, please speak. Jade Archive Xiaohua said with a smile. Taoism's techniques are ever-changing and have the ability to reach the heavens. Whether it was the Confucian cultivators or the Buddhist cultivators, they were far inferior in this aspect. If I simply pursue the ability of Confucianism and cultivate the Tao of primordial spirit, I will follow the prescribed path of refining essence into qi, refining qi into spirit, refining spirit into void, and refining void into heaven. In the end, I will be neglecting the essentials and pursuing the trifles. It is better for me to abandon these appearances and search for the foundation of Confucianism. When Xiaohua heard this, he clapped his hands and said, Immortal friend is right. I also feel that great Master Ci Xiang's words are right. If the Buddhist sect's Fozi doesn't properly handle the relationship between the corporeal body and the Sarira, even if he reincarnates for 10,000 years, he still won't be able to reach the peak. If Confucian scholars don't understand the essence of true energy and cultivation, what can they do even if they reach the void refinement and heaven fusion stage? Taoist cultivators are the same. They don't know the foundation of Taoist cultivation. Even if they cultivate to the transcending tribulation stage, I'm afraid they won't be able to achieve anything. Xiaohua echoed. That's why we each have our own responsibilities. There's no need to compete with each other. The so-called realm, the so-called means, they are all just appearances. Only by grasping the foundation can we achieve the great Tao. Green-robed Xiaohua also spoke from his lower dantian. Good. Xiaohua clapped his hands and opened his mouth. The Imperial Star Spike and Imperial Shield flew out. He said with a smile. To be honest, I already don't want to refine these 2 Imperial tools. This is because the Tao of Imperial tools of Confucianism is far inferior to the Tao of Taoist magic tools. It has already deviated from the foundation of Confucianism. Immortal friend, you should still slowly refine them. Xiaohua waved his hand and said, It's currently a chaotic world. You and I can't cultivate peacefully. One more life-saving means is one more opportunity to explore the essence of cultivation. And Xiaohua agreed and sucked the 2 imperial tools into his mouth. Green-robed fellow Taoist, Xiaohua said with a smile, Presumably, you also understand. The so-called life origin magic treasure is to separate a part of the primordial spirit and refine it into the magic treasure. Using one's own primordial spirit to drive the magic treasure is far more convenient than using one's divine sense to drive it. It's like another magic treasure controlled by oneself. This way, although cultivators can't refine spirit tools, with a life origin magic treasure fused with the primordial spirit, it's possible to touch the threshold of spirit tools. Indeed. Green-robed Xiaohua nodded. Moreover, fellow Taoists already knew that your primordial spirit can no longer be split after going through the 3 gold lightning tribulation. Presumably, you've already given up on the idea of refining a life origin magic treasure, right? No. Xiaohua shook his head. Actually, the origin of a life origin magic treasure, other than the function that I just mentioned, has another function. And I know. Among the Taoist magic skills, there is a primordial spirit entrustment technique. Green-robed Xiaohua had read who knows how many ancient books and secret techniques. He naturally understood very well. A small part of the refining method of this life origin magic treasure was born from this. Yes, the primordial spirit entrustment technique is a great magic skill. It's impossible for ordinary cultivators to successfully cultivate it. Some almighty experts changed this magic skill and taught it to their own disciples, thus obtaining a life origin magic treasure. Xiaohua said with a smile. Similarly, if a cultivator's main body dies, with only the primordial spirit in the life origin magic treasure, it's impossible to achieve the goal of primordial spirit entrustment technique. However, other methods can be thought of, such as possession, to leave a chance of survival. If that's the case, to be honest, I and the others, I'm afraid we're all fellow Taoists' life origin magic treasure, Green-robed Xiaohua said with a sigh. Why is fellow Taoist still entangled with the life origin magic treasure? I don't want to give up on the life origin magic treasure, not because I have to refine it, but because I want to see the mysterious primordial spirit entrustment technique. Xiaohua replied. Unfortunately, the secret technique we obtained is abnormally incomplete. We can't see anything from it at all. Don't think about it. Fellow Taoist already has a spirit tool. In the future, when this spirit tool is complete, it may even be a spiritual treasure. Why bother about the life origin magic treasure? Green-robed Xiaohua said with a smile. Speaking up to here, green-robed Xiaohua seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly said, That's right. If fellow Taoist has nothing to do in the future, don't use the yin and yang dual magic treasure to block disasters. Thinking about Taoist Jing Ru's cauldron, I feel a bit of heartache. See, so that's how it is, Green-robed Xiaohua said, and Xiaohua immediately understood. Although that cauldron isn't much, it contains a trace of Taoist Jing Ru's primordial spirit. It can be considered half a spirit tool. This spirit tool is not a tool spirit. After the yin and yang dual magic treasure, it will certainly have spirituality. In the future, if there's a coincidence, it can be compared to a heavenly spiritual treasure. How can it be just a heavenly spiritual treasure? Green-robed Xiaohua sneered. It's also possible to advance to the Xiantian realm. Fellow Taoist, you're more prodigal than I. I'm happy, so what? Xiaohua rolled his eyes. Who asked I to be rich? Not only do I have the ocean overturning seal, but I also have the Tingjiao scissors and the Kunlun mirror. Although I don't know where the other half of the Tingjiao scissors is, as long as the Kunlun mirror returns to the Dawn Rain continent and finds the golden core cultivator of the rock border sect, Chan Yefeng, I'll be able to obtain the last fragment of the Kunlun mirror. At that time, the Kunlun ruins will become. Just as he said that, Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. That's right, I seem to have said this before. Why am I repeating it now? It was also at this moment of vigilance that shock appeared on Xiaohua's face as he looked in disbelief. At the same time, green-robed Xiaohua already understood Xiaohua's thoughts. His figure flashed and landed in that place. This was where Xiaohua stored his Qianquan pouches, storage pouches, and worn-out magic treasures. An extremely ordinary storage pouch was thrown among them. Green-robed Xiaohua didn't use any magic. Instead, he bent down and rummaged through the storage pouches one by one. He looked at the ordinary storage pouch, but didn't open it. He looked up at Xiaohua's strange expression and asked in confusion. Fellow Taoist, isn't this the storage pouch of Tong Mu's city's Qinyeming? There's a fragment of the Kunlun mirror inside. If there's no accident, it should be in the hands of Chan Yufeng. When fellow Taoist obtained it that day, you knew about it. Why didn't you think of it? Could it be, there's something in this space that you and I don't know about? Yes. Xiaohua raised his head and looked meaningfully at Xiaohua of the heavenly Tao above the starry sky. He said word by word, everything in this world is under the control of the heavenly Tao. Although you and I control this space, you and I aren't the heavenly Tao. It's impossible for us to know everything in this space. Moreover, even if we become immortals, gods, and the so-called heavenly Tao saints, don't forget, there are 50 Dayan numbers, 49 Dayan numbers, and there's still the evasive one. In this world, there's never anything that can be completely controlled. Rumble. Above the starry sky, a deafening sound was endless. The entire space was shaking. The originally vast space couldn't help but expand again. Damn it, the heavenly Tao, is there a mistake? This guy clearly forgot. This made-up reason can actually be understood? Green-robed Xiaohua was dumbfounded. He held his forehead and shouted. Haha, green-robed fellow Taoist, there's no place without knowledge under the heavenly Tao. You've only cultivated for a short time, so learn slowly. Xiaohua proudly took Qinyeming's storage bag, took out the last fragment of the Kunlun mirror, looked at it, and threw it to green-robed Xiaohua. When you're refining the Kunlun mirror, think about it carefully. How did this Kunlun mirror get from Chan Yefeng to Qinyeming? Maybe you'll know something. Huh. Green-robed Xiaohua naturally wasn't convinced. He originally wanted to retort, but his face suddenly revealed a strange expression. He then said with a smile, All right, this poor Taoist won't talk nonsense with you anymore. Either way, you and I will benefit. At this time, Huide is already here. How about it? Fellow Taoist, you can't let him run away this time, right? Fellow Taoist, you should watch the show from the side. When fellow Taoist makes a move, I will help fellow Taoist to kill this guy. -13. Chapter 3695. Good! Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. This Huide Jinren is really hateful. He is especially good at borrowing power and stirring up trouble. At the Jade Pavilion conference, he was lucky to escape by using the Confucian cultivator's formation. This time, we must take his life. With that, Jade Archive Xiaohua left his body and hid to the side to observe. In the night sky, several figures flew over from the distance. However, these figures did not fly directly. Instead, they flew and stopped. Quite a few times, they even flew in other directions. Under the moonlight, the faces of 8 cultivators appeared. The one in front was Zhai Xingzi, who was wearing an emperor's robe. Next to him was Gusuchioran, who had changed into a Taoist robe. At this time, Gusuchioran had a smile in her eyes, unwilling to leave Zhai Xingzi for a moment. Although the two were not flying hand in hand, their hearts were vaguely limitless. Behind Gusuchioran was the smiling Huide Jinren, but he deliberately kept a certain distance from the two and did not disturb them. Behind Taoist Huide were 5 mid-stage nascent soul cultivators. They all had different appearances and expressions, but all of them had respectful expressions on their faces as they carefully followed behind the 3. Zhai Xingzi accompanied Gusuchioran to a mountain peak. The two circled around the mountain and met again in the air above the mountain peak. Their faces were full of disappointment as they shook their heads. What? Isn't this the place that you 2 fellow cultivators are looking for? Huide Jinren flew forward and asked anxiously when he saw this. Well, fellow Taoist Huide, it's not here. Zhai Xingzi looked at the somewhat oval mountain peak below and sighed. That mountain peak is cracked, oh? Could it be? Zhai Xingzi is looking for Heartbreak Mountain? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. Who is the female cultivator beside Jai Xingzi? But within 400 miles of my spiritual sense, there is no such mountain. Fellow Taoist and fairy are mistaken? Hua de Jinren was somewhat puzzled. No, it must be nearby. I know! Gusu Qiuran thought for a moment, and shook her head. Although I don't know why, I know that as long as I find that place, I will be able to solve my confusion. That's right, this old man has the same idea. Jai Xingzi nodded. Fellow Taoist Huda, fellow Taoists, thank you for your hard work. Let's go take a look over there. Jai Xingzi raised his hand in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain. All right. Adept Huda felt somewhat helpless, but he still smiled and said, as long as fellow Taoist Jai Xing and fairy Jai Xing can solve the mystery in your hearts, it's no problem for us to work a little harder. Humph, you were the one who insisted on following us. Gusu Qiuran snorted as if she was looking down on Hua de Jinren. Qiuer, Jai Xingzi blurted out. How can you speak to Taoist Huda like that? As expected, how do you know my nickname? Gusu Qiuran's face was filled with surprise and joy. I don't know either. A rare look of embarrassment appeared on Jai Xingzi's face, but his eyes were the same as Gusu Qiuran's, showing surprise. Gusu Qiuran shouted. I knew it! You and I must have known each other in our previous lives. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so coincidental. Ouch! Just as Gusu Qiuran was pleasantly surprised, there was a sudden scream. Gusu Qiuran's body fell like a rock straight towards the sharp rock beneath her. Qiuer! Jai Xingzi hurriedly moved his body and immediately landed below Gusu Qiuran. He shouted as he was about to catch Gusu Qiuran. However, just as he extended his arm, Jai Xingzi's expression changed slightly. The protective light flashing around his body suddenly disappeared. Like Gusu Qiuran, he could no longer stand in the air and fell towards the rock. However, just as he fell, Jai Xingzi forced himself to change his position so that he was below Gusu Qiuran to prevent her from getting hurt. After doing all this, Jai Xingzi took a deep breath. He wanted to circulate his true origin and fly up again. Unfortunately, the light on the surface of Jai Xingzi's body flickered a few times like a candle in the wind. In the end, it was extinguished. Bang bang! With two loud sounds, Jai Xingzi, who was a late nascent soul master, fell powerlessly on the rock. Gusu Qiuran landed on Jai Xingzi's face, knocking his jade crown askew. Hua de Jinren, what's going on? Jai Xingzi raised his hand and picked up Gusu Qiuran, who was on top of him. He struggled to stand up and sat on a big rock. He looked at Hua de Jinren, who was looking at him with a cold smile in the distance, and asked faintly. Gusu Qiuran, who was sitting in Jai Xingzi's arms, lowered her head shyly at first. When she heard Jai Xingzi's words, she immediately came to her senses. If it weren't for Hua de Jinren's plot, even if they were in danger, Hua de Jinren would only need to wave his hand and they would not fall from the sky. Gusu Qiuran could not help but rage. Jing Yuda! You dare to plot against me? Gusu Qiuran's words were beyond her expectations. She could not believe it was Hua de Jinren who did this. Fellow Taoist Jai Xing, don't worry! Hua de Jinren had a faint smile on his face. He did not fly closer but stood on the side. He waved his hand and the 5 mid-nascent soul cultivators quickly flew around the mountain and surrounded Jai Xingzi and Gusu Qiuran. Hua de Jinren then spoke. I just want to ask, who is this fellow Taoist with Confucian cultivation? How does she know the name of I's nascent soul? I don't remember. I don't know this fellow Taoist. Jing Yuda you. Gusu Qiuran's face was a bit pale. She called out a few times but did not know what to say. You're too bold. Fellow Taoist. Hua de Jinren sneered. I don't even know who you are. How is this bold? Then Hua de Jinren looked up at the 5 mid-nascent soul cultivators who had surrounded Jai Xingzi and Gusu Qiuran and said, Fellow Taoists, please be the judge. This fellow Taoist appeared out of nowhere and met Jai Xingzi alone when we returned from the Jadistage meeting. Jai Xingzi brought her out and did not mention her origin. he only said she was Qiu Xianzi. The strangest thing is that Zhai Xingzi actually sent all the fellow Taoists away while he brought this strange Qiu Xianzi to a strange place. We have already discussed the rules that we will get after the Yaotai meeting. He has already forgotten about the rare treasures and other things that we will get. If I didn't argue with him, he would have brought the 6 of us here. Otherwise, who knows what Zhai Xingzi is up to? Zhai Xingzi looked coldly at Hua Dejinren and did not speak. There was no sign of surrender in his eyes. If I didn't bring you fellow Taoists to follow behind them, how would we have discovered that this so-called Qiu Xianzi is not a Taoist cultivator? Perhaps she knows the simple spells of our Taoism, or perhaps she has our Taoism's mental cultivation method, but this old man can see clearly that she is a genuine Confucian cultivator. Hua Dejinren did not hesitate to reveal Gusa Chioran's background. Since we know that Qiu Xianzi is a Confucian cultivator, then, fellow Taoists, can you think about it more? We just took the pure Yang ancestor from Jadestage Mountain and Qiu Xianzi appeared. What does this mean? Think about it, what else can it mean? It means that Zhai Xingzi is not the Zhai Xingzi we trusted before. He is in cahoots with Confucian cultivators. And this Qiu Xianzi, if I'm not wrong, she should be someone from Jadestage Mountain's Star-Lord Palace. This so-called pure Yang ancestor must be Star-Lord Palace's bait. Zhai Xingzi wants to return the treasure we risked our lives for to Star-Lord Palace through Qiu Xianzi. Damn Jin Yuda, you yourself are Kong Hongwu's subordinate Star General. You unexpectedly slander others, falsely accuse the star plucking? The matter involved the star plucking. Gusa Chioran could not help but be furious, cursing. Oh? Qiu Xianzi is truly incredible. How do you know that I am Kong Hongwu's Star General? Hua Dejinren asked thoughtfully. If you are not from Star-Lord Palace, how do you know? Since you are not from Star-Lord Palace, are you not slandering me? However, Hua Dejinren only said this. He then said to the 5 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators, you didn't believe me before, not daring to help me kill the lackeys of Confucian cultivators. Do you understand now? Jin Yuda. Gusa Chioran bit her lip, her eyes flashing with anger. You are truly despicable. Of course you know who I am, but how can I not know who you are? Gusa Chioran turned to the nascent soul state cultivator next to her and said, Jin Yuda was a pawn that Star-Lord Palace placed among the Tao cultivators. When I saw you all, the first person I contacted was naturally Zhai Xingzi, but the second was him. You may not have noticed Jin Yuda's expression at that time. It was very interesting. His face was ashen. Why? He was afraid I would expose his true face. Fine, now that things have come to this, I will make it clear to you. I am naturally from Star-Lord Palace, and I have an agreement with Jin Yuda. We can't expose each other's details. However, I really didn't expect that Jin Yuda, a little star general like you, would dare to make a move against me. Are you tired of living? AI Lady Qiu, I don't know what you are talking about. You can make up all you want, but I've always been upright. How many cultivators on hidden immortal continents say that I'm from Star-Lord Palace? It doesn't matter whether you're there or not. Hua Dejinren's face was full of sorrow. I believe I am worthy of heaven and earth. I believe I am worthy of my conscience. This is enough. Damn it! Gusa Chioran was obviously not as good as Hua Dejinren. She cursed and struggled with all her might. Unfortunately, no matter how she urged her true chi, it was useless. Heart-corroding bone? Suddenly, Gusa Chioran understood and exclaimed, You actually got Star-Lord Palace's secret poison from Kong Hongwu? You really deserve to die. -13. Chapter 3696. AI Qiu Xianzi, why don't you honestly admit how you colluded with Zhai Xingzi? Taoist would decide again. What's the point of clinging to this old man? To tell the truth, if it wasn't for the 5 fellows seeing the truth, how could this old man allow you dogs to live until today? And this old man's actions are open and above board. This old man absolutely won't be criticized. Using poison is open and above board? Gusuchuran sneered. Others don't know your face, but how could I not know? Taoist Huda righteously said. Your cultivations are similar to this old man's. This old man admits he is not your opponent, but for the sake of the hidden immortal continent's safety, this old man would rather destroy his own reputation. And I absolutely won't let your scheme succeed. Good, Taoist said it well. A tall and thin cultivator praised. Previously, your servant had some misunderstandings about Taoist. Now, these misunderstandings have been cleared up. In the future, if someone asks about Chai Xingzi's death, your servant will naturally testify for Taoist. Ai Taoist Huda. Hearing this, Chai Xingzi said, This old man truly underestimated you. I never expected your scheme to be so deep. Just now, this old man felt your goal was that supreme yang object, pure yang ancestor, but now it seems you still want to take over this old man's forces one by one. Of course, Chai Xingzi did not know that Taoist Huda's goal was not just these two. The most important thing was that he was unable to kill Xiaohua at the Jade Pavilion gathering, so he was unable to give an explanation to Kong Hanwu. Now that he saw Star-Lord Hall's Star General Gusuchuran unexpectedly betrayed Yaopai Mountain, he naturally felt this was an absolutely great opportunity. He only needed to capture Gusuchuran and send her to Star-Lord Hall, and all his previous mistakes would be forgiven. Furthermore, with Gusuchuran rebelling and Jing Mushuan dead, would Star-Lord Hall not have even more Star-Lord positions? He was much closer to Star-Lord positions. It would be strange if he did not seize this opportunity. However, this idea, aside from the dead Kong Han-Wu and Linghu Pyren who was currently guarding Star-Lord Hall, perhaps Gusuchuran herself was not clear. This was why she was especially shocked that Taoist Huda would go back on his word. Taoist Huda did not take any precautions against him. However, Huda Jinren laughed and said, Chai Xingzi, you secretly colluded with Star-Lord Palace. How many disciples of Tao's school have you killed in the Yaotai meeting? Just thinking about it makes my heart ache. Previously, I respected you because you were a pillar of my Tao sect. Now I will kill you because you are a lackey of the Confucian cultivators. Your so-called goal is nothing more than smoke in this old man's ears. This old man disdains to lower himself to your level. Fellow Taoists. Chai Xingzi looked at the 5 nascent soul cultivators. His piercing gaze made the 5 of them not dare to look straight at him. Chai Xingzi said, I won't say much about other things. I admit that Fairy Chiu is a Confucian cultivator. But what I want to tell you is that when we seized the pure young ancestor, the dragon gate that should have appeared didn't appear. At that time, the entire origin formation was about to be destroyed. It was inevitable that we would all die. But at the critical moment, a rainbow bridge appeared. It was this rainbow bridge that allowed us Taoist cultivators of the hidden immortal continent to escape. This rainbow bridge was released by Fairy Chiu. It can be said that without Fairy Chiu, all the Tao school cultivators who participated in the Yaopai meeting would have been completely wiped out. This kind of kindness, this old man does not ask you to repay it, but you can't turn hostile and bite the hand that feeds you, right? Ah? The 5 nascent soul cultivators were obviously stunned. They also participated in the Yaotai meeting and were clear about the danger at the last moment. The appearance of the rainbow bridge was absolutely abrupt. However, they never thought that this sudden and life-saving rainbow bridge was created by Fairy Chiu in front of them. The 5 of them looked at each other with confusion in their eyes. Hee, Chai Xingzi. Huda Jinren laughed. You finally revealed yourself, right? Didn't you say that you didn't collude with the Star-Lord Palace? If you didn't collude with Fairy Chiu, how did you know that the Rainbow Bridge was created by her? This old man saw it. Chai Xingzi was a little angry, but he still said coldly. Huda Jinren also sneered. This old man is strange. My cultivation is not much lower than yours. Why didn't I see it? That day, Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong were also there. Why didn't they see it? Their cultivation is not lower than yours, right? Why didn't they see it? Do you think that your cultivation is higher than all the Taoist cultivators? Chai Xingzi was speechless. The glance between him and Gusuchoran was absolutely shocking. How could he explain it to others? How could he let others understand? So, Jai Xingzi, why do you have to say more? Hua Dejinren laughed grimly. You're the lackey of the Star Lord Palace. You're the culprit who caused our Taoist cultivators to suffer losses in the Yaotai meeting. I didn't wrong you by taking your life. Senior Hua De. A slightly shorter cultivator was a little embarrassed and said in a low voice, I think Senior Jai Xingzi doesn't seem to be a spy of the Star Lord Palace. And it's a little unfair to determine Senior Jai Xingzi's life based on this inference. Even if Fairy Chiu is a Confucian cultivator and a member of the Star Lord Palace, doesn't Senior Jai Xingzi have a good personal relationship with Kong Han Wu, the Lord of the Star Lord Palace? This doesn't mean that Senior Jai Xingzi has wronged us Taoist cultivators. Reverend Mingqian, Hua Dejinren said with a smile. I know you have some doubts in your heart. Of course, the other 4 fellow cultivators also have doubts. However, I didn't invite you here to fight. I just want you to be witnesses. When someone asks, I can tell the world that I'll end Jai Xingzi's life today. Reverend Mingqian looked at the 4 people beside him, who all looked a little embarrassed. However, Hua Dejinren had made it clear. The 5 of them knew that they were no match for Hua Dejinren, so they could only sigh slightly. Buzz. Hua Dejinren finished his words. He had achieved his goal. He raised his hand and a magic treasure appeared in the air, making a roaring sound. Jin Yuda, how dare you! Gusuchoran felt her bones and tendons go numb, but she forced herself to straighten up. She stood in front of Jai Xingzi and scolded. If you want to kill Jai Xingzi, you'll have to kill me first. Hee, Jai Xingzi deserves to die, so do you. You don't think I don't dare to kill a Confucian warrior, do you? Hua Dejinren sneered. Gusuchoran was not afraid. She stared at Hua Dejinren and threatened. Jin Yuda, Star Lord Palace, is not the Star Lord Palace you know. I can tell you clearly that even if I let you Taoist cultivators go, as long as I return to Star Lord Palace, as long as I reveal my identity, that Kong Han Wu won't dare to blame me. Moreover, I can tell you clearly that even if you dare to touch a hair of Jai Xingzi, I'll let immortal soldiers and immortal generals chop you into minced meat. Haha. I'm so scared. Seeing Gusuchoran shouting herself hoarse, Hua De Immortal thought Gusuchoran was just bluffing and pretending to be scared. He shouted, I can't believe a poisoned Confucian woman dares to threaten me with immortal soldiers and immortal generals. That's right. People who have been poisoned by the heart and bone-corroding poison cannot threaten you. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded in the air. 6 nascent soul cultivators and dozens of gold core disciples of the new country were poisoned to death by you. The state preceptor of the Kujiang country, the state preceptor of the Fu country, and the state preceptor of the Lingqing country were also killed by you. There were also 4 nascent soul cultivators and dozens of gold core cultivators from the Luoshui country and Jinyu country of Yongzhou. You also shamelessly offered the monarch of the Luoshui country, Luo Qin, and Jihong Ferry of the Yongzhou country to Jing Mubai of Star Lord Palace. Jin Yuda, do you think these Taoist cultivators who were poisoned by you can't threaten you? You. Who are you? After hearing these words, Hua De Taoist was scared out of his wits. These were his absolute secrets. He thought that he did it without anyone knowing. Outside of Kong Han Wu and Jing Mubao, no one else knew about it. But now, it was suddenly exposed by someone. How could he not be frightened? At the same time, he released his divine sense and frantically scanned the source of the voice. However, just as Hua Dejinren released his divine sense, the voice sounded from another place. It was cold and terrifying. Who I am is not important. What is important is, what did you do? You are Kong Hongwu's lackey. How dare you sow discord and slander Jai Xingzi? Although I don't know if Jai Xingzi is a spy of Star Lord Palace, looking at you jumping up and down, I know he is being slandered. Go to hell. How could Hua Dejinren dare to let the voice speak again? He activated the magic treasure in his hand and a flame flew out, rushing towards the source of the voice. However, just as the flame flew out a few feet, Hua Dejinren's body was overflowing with brilliance. A fist of several feet in size attacked Zhai Xingzi and Gusuchioran. Moreover, Hua Dejinren did not wait for the fist to completely hit Zhai Xingzi, who was no longer able to resist. He immediately turned into a rainbow and fled into the distance. Everything was done in a split second. Hua Dejinren made a prompt decision. Zhai Xingzi roared, "Chiuer, get out of the way!" As he spoke, starlight shone above Zhai Xingzi's head and countless runes surged out. Gusuchioran's expression changed greatly and she shouted, "Zhai Xingzi! Don't!" Obviously, Gusuchioran had seen Zhai Xingzi's determination to sacrifice himself to protect her. Hee. Even your natal magic treasure has been taken by me. Why are you still so arrogant? At this critical moment, the entire mountain peak was suddenly enveloped by an incomparably powerful restrictive formation. Xiaohua's tall and thin figure slowly appeared in the sky. His pair of phoenix eyes flashed with ridicule, and he was still holding a fire gourd in his hand. -13. Chapter 3697. Xiaohua! Hua Dejinren felt his whole body sink into a quagmire. Moreover, this restriction was becoming harder and harder. Not only was his body unable to move, but it was also difficult for the world's yuan qi to flow in. When he heard the voice, although he didn't look back, Hua Dejinren still screamed as if he had seen a ghost. He really didn't expect to meet Xiaohua here. Taoist Master Xiao? At the same time, 3 of the 5 Yuanying middle-stage cultivators were shocked, as if they had heard of Xiaohua's name. Xiaohua was slightly surprised. He glanced at them and didn't pay any attention to them. He smiled at Zhai Xingzi and said, "What a good match! If you were to use your secret technique now, then this fairy Chiu's hatred would be endless in the future." Fellow Taoist, Zhai Xingzi's secret technique was naturally blocked by Xiaohua and couldn't be completed. Now that he heard Xiaohua's words, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. There were many Taoist cultivators in the hidden Immortal continent, but who would dare to say such words to Zhai Xingzi? One Wang. Hua Dejinren didn't dare to be negligent. His whole body was covered in flames. Waves of abnormally strong fluctuations were produced from his body. Xiaohua's restriction immediately began to collapse. Following the loosening of the restriction, a thin crimson crystal thread flew out from Hua Dejinren's head like an arrow. Immediately after, a violent explosion was produced. A passage of fire was immediately revealed. Hua Dejinren's body suddenly turned into a rainbow and flew out of Xiaohua's restriction in a flash. Seeing Hua Dejinren escape, Xiaohua wasn't nervous at all. He smiled and said, "Damn it, old man Hua, look at you. Your life source magic treasure is in my hands. Where can you run to?" While speaking, Xiaohua waved his hand. A golden light chased after him like a thunderbolt. At the same time, a light pillar also shot out from Xiaohua's head like lightning. What was special was that between Xiaohua's curved eyebrows, a layer of dark green brilliance emerged. Hundreds of soul strands, which were invisible to the naked eye, stretched out from the delirium dharma eye and landed on the fire gourd. Sizzle! A series of noises, which sounded like water droplets falling into a pot of oil, was heard. A faint shadow was dragged out from the fire gourd by the soul strands. Looking at the appearance of the shadow, wasn't it Hua Dejinren? "Those who deserve to die will die in the end, no matter how many times you escape," Xiaohua indifferently said as several hundred soul strands stirred with a schwa schwa sound. "Taoist Xiao, save me! Taoist Xiao, save me!" Taoist Hua's primordial spirit screamed crazily, as if he was in extreme pain. "Fellow Taoists from the New Nation won't let you go. Fellow Taoists from the Kujiang Nation, the Fu Nation, and the Lingqing Nation won't let you go. The Luo River Nation, Jingyu Nation, and Fairy Jihong also won't let you go," Xiaohua coldly said. With a twist of his soul thread, Taoist Hua's primordial spirit immediately turned into a blue dot and scattered in the air. "Ah! In the distance, Taoist Buddha also screamed in pain as his primordial spirit was destroyed. He held his head with his hands and rolled in the air. How could he still have the strength to escape? In fact, as early as when Xiaohua obtained Taoist Jing Ru's natal magic weapon, he could also control it like this. However, Xiaohua's soul cultivation realm was still low at that time, and his primordial spirit was not as solid as Taoist Jing Ru's, so he didn't dare to try it. Now, facing Taoist Buddha, it was really easy. The primordial spirit inside the fire gourd was destroyed, and the brilliance of the magic weapon was completely restrained. Xiaohua turned his hand and threw it to the green-robed Xiaohua. Moreover, at this time, the dragon-like golden light had already flown to the left of Taoist Buddha. With a wave of the dragon's tail, Kasha, sounds were heard. Taoist Buddha's protective armor was immediately cut open. The golden light protecting his body was also cut into two under the golden light. Pooh! Following the destruction of his physical body, a 3-feet-long baby's hands were empty. His pale face carried severe pain, and his eyes were also filled with resentment. Xiaohua, just you wait! Taoist Buddha's primordial spirit screamed. If I don't take revenge, I'm not a gentleman. Just wait for Star-Lord Palace to chase you to the ends of the earth. After saying that, a 3-colored cloud accompanied the golden light flashed, and Taoist Buddha's primordial spirit disappeared in an instant. Pung! The Kunlun mirror's beam of light crossed the sky, paused at the place where Taoist Buddha's primordial spirit stopped, and then shot towards the void several hundred feet away. As the light fell, another miserable cry was heard. The late-stage Taoist Buddha had actually teleported several hundred feet away in the blink of an eye. However, the pitiful Taoist Buddha had really met his nemesis. Even if he had teleported to the void, he was still swept up by the Kunlun mirror's beam of light, and was sucked into the broken Kunlun paradise. In the future, perhaps it would be green-robed Xiaohua's excellent robe again. Seeing the seemingly invincible Taoist Buddha being killed by Xiaohua in a few rounds, the eyeballs of the 5 middle-stage nascent soul cultivators almost fell out. Aside from the 3 cultivators who had previously shouted out Xiaohua's name, the other 2 were pale. They stared blankly at Xiaohua destroying Taoist Buddha's corpse and keeping the Qiankuan pouch. He turned his head to look at them with a smile. Taoist Buddha, please spare our lives. The 2 cultivators saw Xiaohua's gaze and suddenly woke up. They hurriedly bowed and said, We were also deceived by Taoist Buddha, humph. Xiaohua sneered and looked at the 3 people. These 3 people's appearances were very unfamiliar. Xiaohua didn't know when he had seen them, so he asked, Do you know this old man? Are you not afraid that this Xiao will kill you? Seeing this, the 3 people looked at each other. One of them hurriedly said, Let me tell you, Taoist Xiao, this junior has never seen Taoist Buddha before. However, this junior's good friend is Qi Ning. He was saved by Taoist Xiao at the Yaotai gathering. After he left the Yaotai gathering and said goodbye to Sun Kong Shangren, he met this junior. This junior heard him talk about Taoist Zhao's righteousness, especially what Taoist Xiao said. Although I have traveled half a li earlier, I know that I am a disciple of the Tao sect, but I am also a human. The word human is easy to write, but human actions are difficult to do. Don't do small kindness, don't do small evil, this is a human. Without a human, without humanity, where would the Tao foundation come from? Where would the Tao skills come from? Only by being a good person can you be a good cultivator, can you truly comprehend the Tao of heaven. This really made him have a deep understanding, and also made him admire Taoist Xiao. That's why this junior remembers Taoist Xiao, that's why. This junior is not afraid, because this junior did not do anything wrong, and is not afraid of Taoist Xiao coming to find me. Yes, this junior's good friend is Taoist Jian. He also said the same thing. Another cultivator hurriedly said. This junior's good friend is Song Yunzi, he followed Senior Zhang Daoran. The last cultivator also hurriedly explained. This junior knows that Taoist Xiao will not kill the innocent. Forget it. Xiaohua waved his hand. These 3 cultivators all heard of his name, he, could be considered to have some reputation in the hidden Immortal continent. Although killing Taoist Huda would provoke Star-Lord Palace's anger, but would Star-Lord Palace's anger be limited to this? He also wasn't afraid of this matter being leaked. Of course, Xiaohua himself also knew that even if these 5 people didn't know him, he couldn't kill them to silence them. You all, make a blood oath! Xiaohua glanced at Zhai Xingzi and Gusuchuran on the mountain rock and said, If what Taoist Huda said is a lie, then what Zhai Xingzi and this Qiu Xianzi said is true. We can't repay the kindness, but we also can't bite the hand that feeds us. Don't let Star-Lord Palace know about Qiu Xianzi's matter. Good, Taoist Xiao is right. The 5 cultivators knew that this matter was no small matter. No matter how generous Xiaohua was, he still had to protect his life first. Xiaohua said Qiu Xianzi, but he might be hinting at Taoist Huda. The 5 cultivators hurriedly made a blood oath to not leak tonight's matter. Then, they very gratefully cupped their hands towards Xiaohua and turned into rainbows and left. Ha ha, Zhai Xingzi, we meet again! Xiaohua smiled and landed on the mountain rock. He tilted his head and looked at Zhai Xingzi, who was holding Gusuchuran. Gusuchuran naturally didn't know that Zhai Xingzi had said bad things to Xiaohua after leaving Yaopai Mountain. She was very shy in front of Zhai Xingzi, but in front of others, she was very bold. Now that the danger was over, her eyes rolled and looked at Xiaohua. She didn't care that she was lying in the arms of a male cultivator. Xiaohua! Taoist Xiao? Gusuchuran asked strangely. You're very powerful. How come I've never heard of your name? It seems, at the Yaopai Mountain gathering, you were also seriously injured. I'm just a nobody. Xiaohua touched his nose and smiled bitterly. I can't afford to be remembered by a big shot. And I can't afford to be misunderstood by a big shot. TCH, you're still a nobody? Gusuchuran said disdainfully. How can a person who can make Jin Yuda, a late nascent soul cultivator, flee at the first sight of him and easily kill Jin Yuda with just a magic treasure be a nobody? It's just that you hide it so well that others can't see it. Since that's the case, Churan Fairy should quickly forget about me. Xiaohua said with a smile, but he didn't go forward. Zhai Xingzi didn't expect Xiaohua to be so narrow-minded. He sighed and said, Taoist Xiao, previously this old man had eyes but failed to see and was deceived by old man Huda. I didn't know that Taoist Xiao was the real chivalrous person and spoke ill of Taoist Xiao. This old man apologizes to this person. Hee, look at what fellow Taoist said. How foreign! You and I are both Taoist cultivators. Even if my bones are broken, my muscles are still connected. How can I put a little misunderstanding in the bottom of my heart? Xiaohua rubbed his hands and looked embarrassed. But when he looked at Zhai Xingzi again, although he was apologizing, his face was still proud, as if this strength of character was innate. If it weren't for Gusuchuran in front of him, Zhai Xingzi probably wouldn't even be able to say these soft words. Seeing that Xiaohua still didn't go forward and still had a smile on his face, Zhai Xingzi suddenly understood and a bitter smile appeared in his eyes. He knew that Xiaohua was definitely not an otherworldly expert. He immediately said in a loud voice, Taoist Xiao, this old man can't thank you enough for saving me today. This old man sees that you and old man Huda are both good at fire attacks. This old man obtained the pure Yang ancestor on Yaohai Mountain, but it's useless in my hands. -13. Chapter 3698. You can't do that! When Xiaohua heard this, he smiled from ear to ear. He rubbed his hands and said, This Xiao doesn't even know what the pure Yang ancestor is, so how would I know that I'm useful? It's not too late to talk about it later, right? Xiaohua walked towards Zhai Xingzi. Zhai Xingzi's heart was as clear as a mirror. However, he was reassured by Xiaohua's attitude. If a person had no greed, then, could he still be called a person? Moreover, if Xiaohua accepted his gift of gratitude, he would definitely do his best to detoxify him. How can that be? Zhai Xingzi smiled. I'm a man of my word. Since I've said it, I can't take it back. If you don't believe me, you can take the jade box out of my Qiankun bag. All right. Xiaohua nodded. If you're really useless, then I'll accept it. However, it's not too late to wait until you're able to move. Xiaohua looked at Zhai Xingzi and Gusuchioran awkwardly. I only know some basic detoxification techniques. I'm afraid I can't detoxify Star-Lord Palace's secret poison. Since Chiochioran is, from Star-Lord Palace, you must know how to detoxify it. Gusuchioran was furious. This heart-corroding, bone-corroding poison is controlled by Star-Lord Palace's Palace Lord. How can we have it? Damn Jean Yuta, I really want to chop you into minced meat. However, Gusuchioran looked at Zhai Xingzi embarrassedly, afraid that Zhai Xingzi wouldn't like it. Alas, old Huda really did bad things. Fairy Jihan was such a good girl, yet she was harmed by him. I didn't think of it. Zhai Xingzi sighs. He glances at Xiaohua and asks curiously. That's right, Taoist Master Xiao, are the things you said true? Even Qiu'er doesn't know about these things. Huda Jinren felt that only he, Jing Muxue, and Shangguan Yiran knew about this evil deed. But he didn't know that everyone would show off. The immortal generals of Star-Lord Palace were also like this. Jing Mushue's drunken show-off fell into the ears of Star Sun Horse Taisher Zhanran. Xiaohua searched Taisher Zhanran's soul and naturally knew about it. However, Xiaohua definitely wouldn't say it out loud. He only smiled and said, This Xiao doesn't know if these are true or not. I just took some cases from several hundred years ago and made up some nonsense. Who would know that it was really done by old Huda? If there's a reason, I'm afraid it's because the Tao of Heaven is clear. Xiaohua, take the Star Child away and send me back to Star-Lord Palace. Gusuchioran said. Kong Hanwu won't dare to make things difficult for me. I'll go find you after I get the antidote. Xiaohua naturally knew that Star-Lord Hall must be in a mess right now. Kong Hanwu was dead, so where could Gusuchioran get the antidote? Besides, with Star-Lord Palace's current vigilance, would Gusuchioran come out after returning? Of course, Xiaohua had Kong Hongwu's Qiankun pouch in the space. It might also have the antidote, but Xiaohua wouldn't take it out unless he had no other choice. Qiu'er, you can't go back. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, Star Child whispered. You saved my Dao sect cultivators. Even if Kong Hanwu doesn't dare to touch you, what about the others? You'll only be walking into a trap if you go back. But if I don't go back, how can you cure the poison? Gusuchioran whispered. This is the heart-corroding bone, a poison that kills the nascent spirit and nascent soul. So it's like this. Star Child smiled and said to Xiaohua, How about this, Taoist Xiao, I'll have to trouble you. Send me and Qiu'er back to Star-Lord Palace and say that you captured us, Star Child. Gusuchioran saw that Star Child was just against her going back. Now that she heard that the poison could harm the nascent spirit, she knew that he was thinking for her safety. She whispered, Although I don't know why I'm so in love with you, you'd better not go. You'll only die in vain. I'll be happy to accompany you in death. Star Child looked at Gusuchioran with the same expression. Although I don't know why, when I see you, I can't take my eyes off you. Alas, it's a pity that we still haven't found the unforgettable place. Gusuchioran sighed. Hee, it's really funny. Xiaohua laughed from the side. It's really a touching scene of a couple in love. But have you all forgotten? How far is this place from Yaotai Mountain? Even if I fly there, can you all last until then? Alas, not bad. Gusuchioran let out a long sigh. Star Child, with our cultivation, the heart-corroding, bone-corroding poison can only last for 3 days. After 3 days, our nascent spirits will start to fester and slowly spread to our bodies. Finally, we'll turn into sewage and even our souls won't be able to escape. It's okay. Star Child didn't seem to be afraid. He looked at Gusuchioran and said, I've lived for 1,000 years and have long been tired of living. Since I met you today, even if I die, so what? It's just that these 3 days are really too short. It's hard to let you and me live freely in this world. Star Child, me too. Gusuchuran also had a sweet smile on her face. Xiaohua was really moved and said with a smile, "How about this, since you only have 3 days to live, I'll take you to the unforgettable place first." "Ah? Xiaohua, do you know where it is?" Gusuchuran's voice trembled with excitement. Xiaohua let out a long sigh and nodded solemnly. "It's not just the unforgettable place for you two, it's also the place where the hearts of countless couples in the world have been broken." After speaking, Xiaohua waved his hand and a cloud wrapped around the two of them and flew to Heartbreak Mountain with Xiaohua. While flying, Xiaohua asked about the appearance of the heart-corroding, bone-corroding poison in detail, as well as the symptoms of poisoning. He secretly thought about how to detoxify it. After all, Xiaohua had an ancient secret technique to fight poison with poison, so he could give it a try. Heartbreak Mountain! Yes, this is Heartbreak Mountain! When they arrived at Heartbreak Mountain, the sky was already bright. In the dawn, the mountain that looked like a broken heart was particularly conspicuous in the desert. Gusuchuran saw it and cried out loudly with tears in her eyes. Even Star Child couldn't help but shed tears on his resolute face and dignified tiger eyes. "You're right, Chiao, this is Heartbreak Mountain. There's forgotten love water on it. You and I weren't fated in a previous life, but in this life, it's just that you and I were forced to drink forgotten love water, so we don't know each other anymore. It's a pity, humans are humans because of love. With love, there's each other, there's hidden immortal continent. Naturally, the forgotten love water can temporarily erase the memories of the lovers, but the love in the heart has a seed, so it won't disappear. Time can't destroy this seed. As long as the lovers meet, no matter how far apart they are, no matter how long they've been apart, the seed will break through the ground again and grow into a towering tree." Looking at Star Child and Gusuchuran holding hands and sitting in front of the stone block, Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. One night ago, at dusk, an infatuated woman drank the forgotten love water and left. One night later, at dawn, 2 infatuated men and women used love to erase the forgotten love water's effects and came here because of love. Everything in the world was strange and variegated, but this was it. Jai Xingzi and Gusuchuran hugged each other as they sat down. They appeared very warm and cozy under the sunlight. After a long while, Jai Xingzi lifted his head and smiled at Xiaohua. "Taoist Xiao, thank you for bringing Chiao and me here. I am more grateful than if you had saved our lives. I've given you everything in my Qianquan bag. Everything I've learned in my life, and the forces I control. I've also given them all to you. Fellow Taoist has my Tao sex inheritance in your heart, so you'll definitely treat these cultivators well. I have no more regrets to be able to meet Chiao again in this life. Chiao and I only have 3 days left to live. We want to quietly spend our last days." "No way!" Xiaohua was a bit dumbfounded, but looking at Gusuchuran's tranquil smile, he already understood what the two were thinking. At this moment, even if he had the power to overturn the 3 realms, so what? How could it compare to the happiness of being close to the person you love the most? "Fellow Taoist Xiao." Gusuchuran also smiled. "I won't hide it from fellow Taoist. I'm a sinner of the Immortal Palace. I've been demoted to Star Lord Palace to confess my crimes. My things are also in my Qianquan bag. Fellow Taoist can also take them. If you're fated, you can bring them to the Immortal Palace. If not, fellow Taoist can take them yourself." "Immortal Palace?" Xiaohua's eyes turned. He had an idea and smiled. "Fellow Taoist, your friendship is so deep that it can move heaven and earth. Today, we've finally reunited. I originally shouldn't disturb your last moments of peace. However, if fellow Taoists can help those 2 couples in the same situation as you two, wouldn't it be more meaningful than waiting for death here?" "What do you mean by that?" Star Child was a bit confused. After all, he and Gusuchuran were both crippled. How could they help others? "Does Fairy Chiao know about the Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal?" Xiaohua asked. Gusuchuran was stunned. She turned to look at Star Child. The two exchanged glances and nodded. "I know." Thus, Xiaohua told Gusuchuran and Star Child about Fujiwen, then looked at the sky and said solemnly, "Counting with my fingers, in 2 days that Lady Yutan should come out. If Fairy Chiu can help the two of them, even if the two of you can't spend your last days in peace, wouldn't you be able to do great deeds? You should go." Without waiting for Gusuchuran to speak, Star Child said decisively, "Such a sentimental little guy, how can we not help? Hee, I'll listen to Star Child's instructions." Gusuchuran replied sweetly, then said to Xiaohua, "However, I can't guarantee that I can help. After all, the Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal needs the Jade Seal inscription of the Immortal Palace to open. I can only give some suggestions or ideas." -13. Chapter 3699. Hearing Qiu Xianzi talk about the Jade Seal inscription, Xiaohua's heart moved. He said with a smile, "Well said, Qiu Xianzi. This Xiao has been thinking hard for a long time, but I don't know how to help you two detoxify. This inscription has enlightened this Xiao. If you two don't worry, this Xiao can try to cure it, but this Xiao can't guarantee." "Really?" Gusuchuran was overjoyed. But Zhai Xingzi frowned. He looked at Xiaohua and said, "Taoist Xiao, if we don't go to Fu Jiwen's place, can you help us cure the poison?" Xiaohua looked at Zhai Xingzi and said seriously, "Taoist Zhai Xingzi, do you think this Xiao is the same as old Wuda? This Xiao just didn't know how to cure the poison." Hearing Qiu Xianzi's words, this heart-corroding, bone-corroding poison was refined by the Immortal Palace. It must be tried from the perspective of a Confucian cultivator. "But..." Gusuchuran nodded like a chick pecking rice. Yes, but Taoist Xiao knows my Confucian cultivation method? Qiu Xianzi doesn't need to worry about this. Let this Xiao think about it carefully first." Saying this, Xiaohua waved his hand and pulled the two up from the mountain rock. Auspicious clouds appeared under his feet, and he took the two to Fu Jiwen's wooden house. A day later, Xiaohua took Zhai Xingzi and Gusuchuran to Fu Jiwen's wooden house. Looking at the small wooden house and the cave on the stone wall, Zhai Xingzi and Gusuchuran knew that Xiaohua was telling the truth. When Fu Jiwen came to greet them, the two's expression was very good. However, Fu Jiwen was stunned. He knew that Xiaohua would definitely come back and that Xianzi Jing might not necessarily follow. He didn't expect Xiaohua to bring two dispirited seniors. However, Fu Jiwen didn't dare to say anything. He hurriedly tidied up the house and invited the two seniors to sit. Seeing the two of them sit down, Fu Jiwen brought up some spirit fruits that didn't seem to be anything special. Xiaohua waved his hand and had Fu Jiwen leave the wooden house. Afterwards, his face changed into a layer of solemnity, and he said in a deep voice, "This Xiao has two pieces of news, one is bad news, the other is good news. I don't know which one the two fellow immortals want to hear first." "Good news." Gusuchuran smiled. "But there are still 2 days left. Wouldn't it be better to be a little happier?" Zhai Xingzi shook his head and said, "Let's hear the bad news first and leave the good news for last." I'll listen to you." Gusuchuran was clearly a strong woman, but in front of Zhai Xingzi, she was so timid and obedient. "Yes." Xiaohua nodded. "The bad news is that after thinking about it for a long time, I still feel that my detoxification skills are too shallow. I'm afraid that I won't be able to cure the two of you." "You haven't tried it yet, how do you know it won't work?" Gusuchuran immediately shouted. "Why don't you try it on me right now?" I'm not afraid. "Sure," Zhai Xingzi hurriedly said. "If you want to try, you should try it on me. Why are you snatching it?" "Of course not," Gusuchuran retorted. "In this life, I've let you do whatever you want, but today, you have to listen to me. Since you've been listening for a lifetime, why?" Zhai Xingzi said. Suddenly his heart moved. Looking at the smile on Xiaohua's face, he couldn't help but laugh. "Taoist Xiao, then, what's the good news?" At this time, Zhai Xingzi seemed to understand something. Xiaohua was definitely not the kind of cultivator who was inflexible. Instead, he liked to watch others make a fool of themselves. Cough, cough. Xiao Hua awkwardly touched his nose and said, Chiao is really impatient. Why didn't you wait for this Xiao to finish? You didn't say it yourself, and you said I was impatient. Gusuchioran, of course, also realized that Xiao Hua was laughing at her. Ha! Xiao Hua laughed. With a wave of his hand, he took out a jade bottle and said, The good news is naturally, this Xiao found the antidote from Old Man Hua's universe bag. Impossible! Gusuchioran immediately shouted. Even I don't have this kind of secret medicine, how could Jin Yuta have it? Xiao Hua shrugged and said very confidently, This Xiao doesn't know. Anyway, if you don't want to take it, I'll throw it away. With that, Xiao Hua pretended to throw it away. This old man will try it first. Jai Xingzi didn't know whether to laugh or cry and hurriedly said, I'll try it first. Gusuchioran rushed to say. Xiao Hua walked in front of Jai Xingzi and rolled his eyes at Gusuchioran. Chiao is a fairy of the Immortal Palace. Don't you know that men and women shouldn't touch each other? You can watch from the side first. You! Gusuchioran pouted. Her gray face showed a kind of anger, as if no one other than Jai Xingzi could make her suffer like this. Xiao Hua opened the jade bottle and a refreshing sweet fragrance immediately spread out. Xiao Hua pointed his finger, and a drop of milk-like juice fell into Jai Xingzi's mouth. Gusuchioran had never seen a real heart and bone-corroding antidote before. Her eyes unconsciously widened and her heart jumped as she stared straight at Jai Xingzi. After the antidote entered his mouth, Jai Xingzi immediately closed his eyes. After a while, he opened his eyes. His eyes were dim, and he slightly shook his head. Impossible? Xiao Hua scratched his head and looked at the antidote in his hand. This should be. At this time, Jai Xingzi's slightly regretful voice sounded. Alas, it's a pity that this is the antidote. Otherwise, this old man would like to see Taoist Zhao's detoxification technique, Che. Xiao Hua flung his hand and threw the jade bottle at Jai Xingzi, not caring whether Jai Xingzi could really move or not. Jai Xingzi rarely teased Xiao Hua. Gusuchioran was just in a good mood. At this time, Xiao Hua immediately threw the jade bottle and hurriedly shouted, Catch it, Xingzi! Of course, Jai Xingzi was very anxious. The antidote was not wrong, but how could it be so effective? Jai Xingzi's primordial spirit and Yuanying had just recovered. His limbs were still stiff, and it was impossible for him to catch the jade bottle. Seeing the jade bottle fall on his body, Jai Xingzi was flustered. After catching the jade bottle with great difficulty, his forehead was already covered with sweat. As a late Yuanying master, Jai Xingzi seemed to have never been in such a difficult situation. However, at this time, Jai Xingzi did not have any superfluous thoughts. He hurriedly clumsily took the jade bottle and poured the antidote into Gusuchioran's mouth like an old man of thousands of years. After a drop of antidote entered her mouth, Gusuchioran hurriedly closed her eyes. She opened her eyes in an instant and said with a smile, Xingzi, Jinren is right. This is the antidote to the heart and bone erosion. This Jin Yuta really has Kong Hongwa's trust. That's good. Jai Xingzi had just opened his mouth when the jade bottle in his hand flew back into Xiao Hua's hand. Xiao Hua's faint voice could be heard. This kind of poison that can kill without leaving a trace is really a good item to have at home. I have to keep this antidote for myself. Hee hee. Jai Xingzi was in a very good mood after surviving a disaster. He took out a small qianqun bag from his arms and handed it to Xiao Hua. There is the pure yang ancestor that I got from Yaopai Mountain. There is also the jade eye in the jade box, which is the way to unlock the inscription seal. I haven't had time to see it yet. You can see it yourself. Good. Xiao Hua was not polite. He took the small qianqun bag and put it in his arms. Cough, cough. Jai Xingzi coughed twice and said, Jinren Xiao, there are also some jade slips in the small qianqun bag. They are the secret books of my Dao cultivator lineage. Please return them to me. Oh? Is that so? Xiao Hua put his hand into his bosom and was about to take out the small qianqun bag. However, after taking out half of the qianqun bag, he stopped there. Xiaohua tilted his head and asked curiously, "What is the secret book of your lineage about?" "This?" Zhai Xingzi looked at the small qiankun bag and hesitated for a moment before saying, "When I was young, I obtained some secret techniques about the power of stars. Oh, no wonder. I understand now." Xiaohua's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, "No wonder you call yourself Zhai Xingzi." When I heard the name Zhai Xingzi, I couldn't help but think of Zhai Xinglu. I thought you were the shopkeeper of Zhai Xinglu. Oh, do you know Zhai Xinglu? Could it be that I didn't recognize the mountain? I've heard of Zhai Xinglu. However, I don't have any relationship with Zhai Xinglu. It's just that my name is a little coincidental. Zhai Xingzi was now somewhat regretting that he had impulsively given the small qiankun bag to Xiaohua. However, it was still all right. The small qiankun bag was right in front of Zhai Xingzi's eyes. He reckoned that Xiaohua wouldn't be able to do anything to it. Xiaohua nodded and took out the small qiankun bag from his bosom. However, he stopped as if he had thought of something again. He didn't return the small qiankun bag to Zhai Xingzi. Instead, he blinked his eyes and asked, "Then has Zhai Xingzi been to Zhai Xinglu before? I once saw a map of the stars in Zhai Xinglu and was deeply moved by it." Cough, cough. Zhai Xingzi coughed again. He shook his head and said, "I've never been to Zhai Xinglu before. If I have time in the future, I'll go back and take a look. Taoist Master Xiao, please take the jade box away and return the qiankun bag to me." "Oh, all right." Xiaohua opened the small qiankun bag with a smile. He took a look and said with a smile, "Fellow Zhai Xingzi, you have a lot of private collections." It's nothing much. It's just some junk." Zhai Xingzi smiled as he watched Xiaohua take out the jade box. Xiaohua suddenly asked, "That's right. Fellow Zhai Xingzi, why didn't you open it and take a look?" Zhai Xingzi was startled. He smiled and said, "Didn't I say earlier that I wasn't interested in the pure Yang ancestor? What I wanted was the Azure Abyss Dragon Saliva. However, that item was taken away by Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong, so I could only take this item. As for the other treasures on Yaohai Mountain, I wasn't interested in them. Therefore, I never opened them." At this point, Zhai Xingzi hesitated for a moment and said, "Actually, I have a secret technique that I haven't been able to make any progress in. It requires the help of a treasure with the power of the stars and moon. Therefore, I wanted to use this item to exchange for a treasure with the power of the stars and moon. However, before I could say anything, I was framed by Huda. -13. Chapter 3700. Really? Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "That's really too much. I don't know if it's my fate or Zhai Xing's." "Oh? What do you mean?" Zhai Xingzi was stunned. He looked away from the small universal pouch in Xiaohua's hand. Xiaohua looked very excited. He glanced at Gusuchuran and said, "I have an appointment with a Taoist cultivator from the Single Yang Kingdom. We'll go treasure hunting somewhere in the Jing province in a month." "Single Yang Kingdom?" Zhai Xingzi frowned. He looked at Xiaohua and asked, "Which Taoist is the state teacher of the Single Yang Kingdom? How come I've never heard of him?" Even if Zhai Xingzi didn't mention the state teacher of the Single Yang Kingdom, Xiaohua would have thought of a way to mention it. Now that Zhai Xingzi was so cooperative, he immediately told Xiao Jian and Xiao Jun's story with a smile. He then explained, "That Taoist isn't a state teacher. I just happened to meet him. However, I heard from him that it's an ancient ruin. His cultivation isn't enough, so he didn't dare to go. He wanted to ask for help, but he himself, the help he could find was limited. So he asked me to take him there. Now that you want to get the Star Moon treasure, the ancient ruin might have it. Why don't you go with me?" This? Zhai Xingzi hesitated when he heard about the ancient ruin. Just as Fairy Jing said, the ancient ruin was too dangerous. Ordinary Taoist cultivators wouldn't go there unless they had no other choice. After thinking for a moment, Zhai Xingzi said, "Let's discuss this after Qio, and I detoxify the poison." "That's fine. There's still enough time." Xiaohua replied happily. Soon after, he came to his senses and hurriedly returned the small cosmos bag to Zhai Xingzi. Zhai Xingzi saw that the small universal pouch didn't leave his sight and didn't sense any spiritual sense or magic power fluctuations. He didn't suspect anything. Unfortunately, he didn't expect Xiaohua to copy the jade slip. Why would he need to do it himself? Zhai Xingzi and Gusuchuran both closed their eyes. They either activated their vital essence or vital essence to detoxify the poison. Xiaohua glanced at them and left the wooden house. Outside the wooden house, Fu Jiwen stood there respectfully. Seeing Xiaohua come out, he hurriedly bowed and said, "Senior!" Xiaohua looked at the sky and said with a smile, "Are you feeling especially excited right now?" "Yeah." Fu Jiwen didn't hide it. "Junior can only see my wife for 2 hours a year, so of course I'm excited." "Hee hee." Xiaohua smiled and said somewhat disrespectfully, "Unfortunately, no matter how excited you are this year, I'm afraid you won't have enough time." Fu Jiwen blushed and smiled. "Senior, has Fairy Jing left?" "Yeah, she's gone." Xiaohua was somewhat disappointed and frustrated. "Some people are very smart, and can always be melancholy without rain. Stupid people like you and me are unable to reach that level. It's fine if this old man is stupid, but I've never seen you. You clearly know that this kind of marriage is impossible, but you still wait for it year after year. In the eyes of a smart person, this kind of wait is not worth it. Where is Senior?" Fu Jiwen faintly smiled. "Since Fairy Jing has left, she must have realized that Senior is as stupid as this Junior." "Perhaps." Xiaohua stretched. "Everyone has their own choice, and everyone has their own path to walk. Bystanders can't force them." "Yes, this Junior understands." Fu Jiwen lowered his head. After a while, he quietly said, "I wonder who these two seniors are? One is a late-stage nascent soul Taoist master. The other is a Confucian master who has refined his spirit back to the void," Xiaohua said indifferently. "But they're also a pair of ill-fated Mandarin ducks." "Ah?" Fu Jiwen was really shocked. He didn't expect that the two poison people had such a great background. They were both people that he couldn't compare to, so he couldn't help but cry out in a low voice. "What's so strange about it?" Xiaohua glared at him. "You'll be such a person sooner or later, as long as you walk your own path." "Yes, yes." Fu Jiwen was sweating profusely. He was only at the 2nd level of essence energy. He was far from the upper 4th level and 5th level of essence energy. Even if he had this ambition in his heart, he didn't dare to say it out loud. "Last time, this old man saw that the inscription you used was very strange. Aside from being able to form sentences and chapters like ordinary inscriptions, it can also form formations. Has your cultivation improved in these past few years?" Xiaohua asked indifferently. Then, he waved his hand, and a restriction covered the two of them. Back then, Fu Jiwen still hid some things from Xiaohua, but now, he was sincerely convinced of Xiaohua's abilities. He only pondered a little before telling Xiaohua about his cultivation. It had to be said that Fu Jiwen was also a genius. In addition to being familiar with poetry and books since childhood and condensing the noble spirit, he had also comprehended the Tao sex cultivation method. In particular, he had obtained an incomplete talisman cultivation method. At that time, Fu Jiwen didn't know much, but he liked these strange things. Therefore, while condensing the true qi and refining the essence into qi, he had also tried these powerful things. Who would have thought that he would hit the jackpot by a stroke of luck when the noble spirit in his middle dantian condensed into something that looked like a page of a book? This book page seemed to be a seed, a golden core, and even a tortoise shell. However, Fu Jiwen's cultivation was still shallow. Although there were some simple inscriptions on the book page, the inscriptions were faintly discernible. Moreover, the outline of this book page was already incomplete. It was very damaged, like a mulberry leaf that had been swallowed by a silkworm. Although Fu Jiwen still didn't know what this book page in his middle dantian was, he did know that this thing was extraordinary. Therefore, Fujiwen called this book page the Heavenly Book. In particular, because the book page condensed from the noble spirit, although it also looked like a Confucian book page, it was different from ordinary cultivation. Fujiwen didn't dare to tell anyone, and could only explore and cultivate by himself. As Fujiwen continued to understand the Heavenly Book, not only did the book page of the Heavenly Book slowly become complete, the inscriptions inside also gradually became clear. At the same time, more inscriptions appeared for Fujiwen to comprehend and use. According to his own cultivation of talismans, Fujiwen began to impart these inscriptions according to these inscriptions. In addition to the unique attack and defense methods, he also used different inscriptions to form different array talismans. These array talismans could be used for both defense and attack. The degree of defense and attack was different according to the array talismans. When he was in the Bronze Pillar country, Fujiwen used the inscriptions to form an array talisman to cover his body. In recent years, Fujiwen's array talisman technique had made progress. The offensive array talisman that he used in the past had a new change. It could be formed into 36 array talismans with different power to be used together. Fujiwen called it the Tiangang Talisman Array. Now, he was comprehending more array talismans, which was the Earth Demon Talisman Array that he had not yet completed. "Senior, please take a look." While speaking, Fujiwen's genuine chi surged around his body. One by one, the inscriptions flew out. These inscriptions danced slightly and formed a flying sword that was more than a foot long. The flying sword was overflowing with layers of inscriptions, and wisps of noble spirit drifted. The sharp sword edge looked no different from a Dao Sex magic weapon. Fujiwen said with some pride, "This is the latest discovery of this junior. This junior has tried it, and its power is not small." With that said, Fujiwen waved his hand. "OM!" The flying sword rushed out with a roar and landed on the stone wall. Shwa! Like penetrating a piece of tofu, the flying sword went straight through the stone wall. "Good!" Xiaohua clapped his hands and praised. "This kind of noble spirit is the source of the Confucian cultivator's noble spirit, and is used in the Dao Sex way is rare. Especially the Heavenly Book in your dantian. If this old man does not expect, in the future, if you cultivate properly, you will definitely reach the peak of 5 Chi's unification. However, as for how to cultivate, this old man still needs to carefully consider for you." Hearing this, if Fujiwen missed it again, then he was really a fool. Fujiwen almost did not hesitate to kneel on the ground, kowtow, and said, "Disciple Fujiwen is willing to become a disciple of Benevolent Master. Benevolent Master, please guide disciples' cultivation." "Hee." Xiaohua laughed and said, "This old man and you are quite fated. Last time, I had the thought of accepting you as a disciple, but you may not believe this old man. This old man also laughed and felt that we were not fated to be together. Who would have thought that I could meet you here? Especially you can be loyal and devoted, which is quite to this old man's taste, so this old man will accept you as a disciple. Many thanks, Benevolent Master." At this time, Fujiwen was really lonely and felt that there was nothing in this world that he could trust. Seeing that Xiaohua did not abandon him and even accepted him as a disciple, faint tears flowed down his face. He respectfully kowtowed 9 times and shouted, "Ai, what a pity!" Just as Xiaohua reached out to help Fujiwen up, Jai Xingzi and Gusuchioran walked out of the wooden house behind him. Gusuchioran had a strange expression, looking at the world's simplest apprenticeship, and sighed. This concubine heard that Fujiwen is a Confucian cultivator, and that he is so faithful to his wife. This concubine wanted to accept him as a disciple, but who would have thought that Taoist master would be 1 step ahead of me? Fairy, you are not just 1 step behind. Xiaohua helped Fujiwen up and said with a smile, "This Xiao has already formed a relationship with Fujiwen. You are 1 step behind and 1 step behind. How can you accept him as a disciple?" Hee Fujiwen. Gusuchioran actually looked at Fujiwen and said with a smile, "Although Taoist Master Xiao knows some Confucian cultivation methods, you can rest assured that what he cultivates is definitely not the orthodox method of the 100 schools of thought. Although this old man has been banished to the hidden immortal continent, this old man was originally a soldier of the immortal palace. In the future, I will definitely return to the immortal palace. You are a Confucian cultivator. If you accept this old man as your master, not only will you be able to cultivate the orthodox method, you will also be able to step into the immortal palace. You have to think clearly. Are you willing to accept this old man as your master? Fu Jiwen respectfully saluted and said carefully, "This question, actually, senior doesn't need to ask. You should already know the answer. Why make things difficult for junior?" -13. Chapter 3701. Haha, what a smart kid! Jai Xingzi laughed, took out a jade eye and handed it to Fu Jiwen. This is a cultivation method that I obtained in my early years. It's useless for me, so I'll give it to you. Thank you, senior. Fu Jiwen didn't care whether he needed it or not, and hurriedly took it and bowed. Gusuchuran was a bit embarrassed. She looked at Jai Xingzi and said, "I came out in a hurry, so I didn't bring any imperial tools. In fact, the imperial tools of the Immortal Palace are really good." Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's okay if you don't have any imperial tools. As the saying goes, it's better to teach a man how to fish than to give him a fish. Fairy, just take out one imperial tool refining method. Taoist Xiao is really good at scheming." Gusuchuran pursed her lips and smiled, but a moment later she took out a jade eye and said, "I really do have one here. It's a greeting gift." "Thank you, senior." How could Fu Jiwen not know that Xiaohua wanted it himself? He hurriedly took it and prepared to give it to Xiaohua. Jai Xingzi asked again, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, what is the pure yang ancestor? Have you seen it?" Hearing this, Xiaohua was immediately on guard. He said with a careful face, "I haven't seen it yet. But it's already mine, so fellow Taoist Jai Xing shouldn't think about it." Jai Xingzi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He really didn't understand. Xiaohua's cultivation is higher than his, and he is thousands of years old. How can his expression be so rich? "Actually, I'm also very curious." Gusuchuran smiled and said, "Star-Lord Hall." Speaking here, Gusuchuran apologetically stopped and said embarrassedly, "I won't talk about Star-Lord Hall. I also want to know what kind of treasure the Immortal Palace took to lure the Tao cultivators of the hidden Immortal Continent into a trap." "Okay." In fact, Xiaohua was also curious. After all, it was one of the three great treasures of the Jade Pavilion gathering. Moreover, it was the last one to appear, so it had a huge gimmick, pure yang ancestor. Xiaohua really couldn't think of any treasure that deserved the name of pure yang ancestor. Xiaohua opened the jade box and took out the jade eyes. After a moment, an inexplicable smile appeared on his face. Jai Xingzi and Gusuchuran were confused. Jai Xingzi suppressed his curiosity and did not ask. Gusuchuran asked, "Jinren Xiao, what do you mean?" "There's no other reason," Xiaohua said with a smile. "Opening the inscription chain requires the true qi of a Confucian cultivator, and there are also requirements for the control of the true qi. If there's even the slightest mistake, the inscription chain will explode, and the things inside will disappear." "Hee, I knew it! How is it possible for a pie to fall from the sky?" Jai Xingzi mocked himself. "This old man doesn't have the confidence to open these inscription chains. I'll leave it to you." Xiaohua handed the jade eyes in his hand to Fu Jiwen and said, "Help your master first." "Me?" Fu Jiwen was surprised, but he didn't dare to hesitate. He quickly took the jade eyes and looked at it carefully. Gusuchuran smiled and said, "If you are not confident, then let me help you. Or, it won't be too late for me to help you after I recover my cultivation. It doesn't matter, I can do it myself." Xiaohua smiled and waved his hand. "It's just that I want to see Fu Jiwen's background." Fu Jiwen looked at the cultivation method for an entire meal, then handed the jade pupils over to Xiaohua, an eager expression appearing on his face. Seeing this, Xiaohua simply didn't ask any more questions. He tossed the jade box in his hand and said with a smile, "You open it." "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen took a deep breath, and a huge vortex appeared above his head. The awe-inspiring qi rushed into the vortex, and then Fu Jiwen opened his mouth, and hundreds of inscriptions flew out in a very orderly manner. Buzz, buzz, buzz! As soon as these inscriptions appeared, they immediately flashed with different lights. As the lights flashed, the inscriptions also made strange sounds. When the sounds fell into Gusuchioran's ears, a kind of surprise arose spontaneously. Fu Jiwen raised his hand and put his index finger and middle finger together, as if he was making a sword gesture. Quick! As Fu Jiwen chanted the incantation, the hundreds of inscriptions rushed toward the inscription chains in the jade box. The inscriptions were only a few feet away from the jade box. The chains of inscriptions inside the jade box seemed to have sensed something and instantly shone brightly. Wisps of clouds emerged from between the inscriptions. Immediately, several chains of inscriptions began to circulate within the clouds, as if several dragons were roaring in the clouds. Shwa! Fu Jiwen urged the inscriptions to rush into the jade box. In the blink of an eye, the inscriptions were divided into several parts, and each part covered an inscription chain. Moreover, the inscriptions were a little slow at first, but gradually they became similar to the inscriptions' chains. In the end, they were almost exactly the same as the inscriptions' chains. Fall! Just as Fu Jiwen urged the inscriptions to circulate in the same way as the inscriptions' chains in the jade box, Fu Jiwen shouted. Boom! The hundreds of inscriptions immediately turned into array talismans and fell into the inscriptions' chains. Zalala! An unpleasant and obscure sound came out, like the friction between flying swords. The hundreds of inscriptions were like ants falling between the inscriptions' chains. Separate! Fu Jiwen saw that his formation talisman could easily fall into the inscription chain, and his face was filled with joy. He reprimanded again without hesitation. Swish! Like the sound of rain hitting banana leaves, the inscription chains fell from the jade box one by one like dead insects. Good! Others may not know, but when Gusuchioran saw this control of inscriptions, she couldn't help but applaud, and even said with great regret, What a pity! It seemed that it was a great pity that she couldn't accept Fu Jiwen as her disciple. Good! Xiaohua smiled faintly, and gently opened his mouth. Puff! A sharp sword cry sounded, and a green light seemed to break the restriction formation under the inscriptions. Immediately, a hot and sharp green light gushed out from the restriction formation, and wherever the green light passed, the void was burned and cracked. Tai he green light? Seeing the slightly familiar green light, Xiaohua couldn't help but be happy. He opened his mouth again, and the flying swords of Tai Wei green light and Tai Yi green light fell into it. Whoosh whoosh whoosh! The Tai Yi green light seemed to have spiritual qi, and rushed into the air with the flying swords of Tai Wei green light and Tai Yi green light, revealing a red and delicate object in the Tai Yi green light. This is innate fire essence! Jai Xingzi didn't know how powerful it was, and when he couldn't see it clearly with his naked eyes, he released his newly recovered divine sense. As soon as his divine sense scanned the object, it was immediately burned by the object, and even cut by the sharp Tai Yi green light. Jai Xingzi immediately thought of the legendary object. No wonder it's called Pure Young Ancestor! Gusuchioran was also shocked. It's innate fire essence! How strange! Xiaohua smacked his lips. He knew better than anyone that innate fire essence, innate gold essence, and innate jellyfish couldn't be wrapped with divine sense, and couldn't be taken away by ordinary techniques. Therefore, even when Kong Hanwu said it was pure young ancestor, he didn't think that it was innate fire essence, because he didn't think that the Confucian cultivator had any means to take innate fire essence, let alone put it in a jade box. Jai Xingzi felt lucky and said, Luckily, that old man Huada gave himself away first. If he had hidden for another half a year, I would have given him the innate fire essence when I saw that I couldn't use it. When he finished refining it, I'm afraid that even I wouldn't be his opponent. Xiaohua didn't answer Jai Xingzi. With a wave of his hand, his mind wrapped around the entire jade box and the scattered restrictions, sending them all into the space. As for the Taihe green light, Xiaohua had already absorbed it into his middle dantian, fusing it with the sword intent of the 9 stars soaring the sun for Xiaohua to refine. Fellow Taoist Jai Xing, Xiaohua received the innate fire essence, and was very happy. He smiled and said, "This Xiao has great use for it, thank you very much. Since this Xiao obtained it, I hope you won't be empty-handed. What's your decision now?" "Go, Jai Xingzi!" Gusuchuran smiled and said, "Now that we've reunited, although I don't know who forced us to drink the forgotten love water, it's obvious that their strength is far beyond ours. If I'm not mistaken, it should be the Immortal Palace's law enforcement envoy. If you want to stay with this concubine forever, your strength must be raised. Only after you reach the out-of-body realm can you negotiate with the Immortal Palace and make the Confucian family compromise. And what you said is very true." Jai Xingzi nodded. "My cultivation hasn't improved for many years. If I don't go to the ancient ruins to gain experience, how can I break through the bottleneck? When my cultivation recovers in the next 2 days, I'll immediately go with Taoist Xiao. This concubine also wants to go." Gusuchuran didn't hide her attachment. "In the future, this concubine doesn't want to leave Jai Xingzi for even half a step." "Good!" Xiaohua clapped his hands and smiled. He originally wanted to pull a late nascent soul cultivator, but he didn't expect that the other party would give away a Confucian cultivator of the lower 5th level for free. This transaction was really interesting. "Humph!" Gusuchuran pouted and snorted, saying to Fujiwen, "Fujiwen, is your wife coming out tonight?" "Yes." Fujiwen's face was slightly red as he replied, "If possible, why don't you take out the Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal and let this old one take a look?" Gusuchuran asked. "Perhaps this old one can give you a surprise." Fujiwen was overjoyed and hurriedly took out the thunder amplification wooden box from his body. After opening it, he revealed the jade crystal inside. Gusuchuran didn't reach out her hand. Instead, clouds flashed above her eyes, and circles of golden brilliance rotated in her eyes, falling towards the Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal. Unfortunately, after looking at it for a cup of tea's time, her face still didn't change. When she withdrew the clear eyes technique, she shook her head and said, "This old one's words were too big. This old one can only see that this is indeed the Immortal Palace's Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal, but as for which punishment palace did it, which law enforcement envoy controlled it, I can't see." -13. Chapter 3702. "So you won't be able to unlock it?" Xiaohua asked disappointedly. "Of course I won't be able to unlock it," Gusuchuran retorted. "I've said it clearly before, this inscription law chain is completely different from the one on the innate fire mother. This inscription law chain contains a trace of the Immortal Emperor's will, and it also contains the pressure of the Immortal Palace. Without a jade seal, it's impossible to unlock it. The surprise I'm talking about is, I might be able to tell from the inscriptions on the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal that it was carved by the Master of Law. I might be able to find which punishment hall it belongs to. With these clues, I might be able to help Fujiwen. Confucian cultivators have always been particular about order, and the Immortal Palace is the leader of order. This inscription law chain contains the order of Confucian cultivators. It's not something we Dao sect cultivators can unlock." Jai Xingzi sighed. Fujiwen's expression didn't change. He took the inscription law prison crystal from Gusuchuran and said respectfully, "Junior thanks to seniors. Junior is already prepared to be able to stay by my wife's side, regardless of the method. Junior is satisfied." "All right." Xiaohua nodded. "You must be happy to have such thoughts. There aren't many family members in this world who can stay by your side for the rest of your life. I don't know about others, but Jai Xingzi and I will definitely be able to." Gusuchuran smiled at Jai Xingzi with a happy expression. If Gusuchuran was so affectionate in front of Xiaohua, Jai Xingzi wouldn't feel anything, but in front of a junior like Fujiwen, Jai Xingzi felt a bit awkward and coughed slightly. Who knew that Gusuchuran would pout, and become even more aggressive as she hugged Jai Xingzi's arm. Jai Xingzi moved his arm but didn't dare to pull it out. At this moment, Gusuchoran didn't look like a level 5 elemental energy grandmaster anymore. Time passed very quickly. Seeing that it was almost night, Fu Jiwen carefully placed the wooden box containing the thunder amplification wood on the floor of the wooden house. He clasped his hands together and waited for the moment to arrive. Kacha! Suddenly, several thunderbolts appeared in front of everyone's eyes like horned dragons. Soon after, the thunderbolts struck the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. However, before the thunderbolts could land, they were blocked by the wooden box. Shwa shwa, sounds could be heard from the thunder amplification wood. It was as if there was sand moving inside. Soon after, some purple lightning in the wooden box entered the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. Wang! The Heaven's Punishment prison crystal let out a rumbling sound in the lightning and floated up from the wooden box. The inscription chains began to float and overflow again. A kind of indescribable solemnity, a kind of orderly, irresistible and rebellious feeling was born from these chains and gradually spread throughout the entire wooden house. Not to mention Xiaohua and the others who were standing solemnly, even the somewhat messy books began to move on their own without any wind, gradually moving on their own and becoming orderly. Order! Xiaohua suddenly realized. Rules? Enchantment? Since he was enlightened, Xiaohua immediately closed his eyes. He didn't release his divine sense and only used the heavenly infusion technique. The pores all over his body opened wide as he carefully comprehended the power of the Immortal Palace's rhythmic chains. Xiaohua's abnormality immediately attracted Jai Xingzi's attention. Unfortunately, with Jai Xingzi's late Yuanying stage cultivation, he still didn't understand the power of rules. Perhaps he somewhat understood, but he didn't sense anything from the order of the Confucian cultivators. This Taoist Master Xiao is a bit strange. Jai Xingzi wanted to release his divine sense to see what Xiaohua was doing. Unfortunately, just as his divine sense was released, it was immediately defeated by the inscription chains. At this moment, the wooden house was filled with the order of the Confucian cultivators. Taoist techniques simply couldn't be used. Kacha! A series of faint sounds like the blooming of winter plum blossoms appeared in everyone's hearts. The order that enveloped the entire wooden house was swept away. Several intertwined inscription chains broke from the middle. One by one, they turned into inscriptions and fell into the Heaven's Punishment prison crystal. Then, a cloud rushed out from the crystal. A beautiful woman wearing a flawless heavenly robe appeared from the cloud. Fu! When the woman appeared, she didn't look at anyone else. She flew into Fu Jiwen's arms like a little bird. Fu Jiwen was greatly embarrassed. He hurriedly opened his mouth and prepared to remind Yutan. But at this moment, an even more surprised voice sounded. Bayan! Why? Why is it you? Ah? The woman called Yutan, but actually called Bayan, was greatly shocked. She unbelievably stuck her little face out of Fu Jiwen's arms. When she saw Gusuchoran, she was similarly shocked. Gusuchodi! You! However, just as Bayan was halfway through her words, she saw Jai Xingzi again. The surprise on her face was even greater. Moreover, there was a kind of excitement and disappointment in her surprise. You! Why are you with Luo Kong again? Didn't you drink the forgotten love water? Sigh, I've been punished for nothing. Bayan had only appeared for a moment. Her 2 sentences were like 2 huge thunderbolts that immediately knocked everyone unconscious. Jai Xingzi opened his mouth. He was really surprised. Luo Kong was his original name. Ever since he became a nascent soul, no one had called him that for many years. He had almost forgotten this name. And Gusuchodi's face was even more excited. She shouted, That's right, Jai Xingzi, you're called Luo Kong. I remember now. Your Dharma name Jai Xingzi was given to you by me. You. Bayan was a little confused. She looked at Gusuchodi, and then at Jai Xingzi. Her gaze also fell on Xiaohua. However, At this moment, Xiaohua still had his eyes closed as if he was an outsider. Bian just glanced at him, and then skipped over. Wife! What's going on? Fu Jiwen was really at a loss. He asked softly. Bian broke free from her surprise. Her face was slightly red. She first looked at Fu Jiwen apologetically and said, Husband, before I hid a lot from you. But now, no need to say more. I know that you found someone to help me. My original name is Bian. There's no need to talk about my background. The reason why I was imprisoned in the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal was because I violated the immortal law of the Immortal Palace. As for the immortal law, it's actually related to Sister Gusu. As for what it's related to, husband, it's better that you don't know. The more you know, the more it will affect your safety. Fu Jiwen took a deep breath and said with a smile, I'll listen to my wife's orders. If my wife doesn't want me to know, then I won't ask. Good. Bian looked at Gusuchiodi with an indescribable expression. She asked, Sister Gusu, what's going on? Didn't you and Luo Kong both drink the forgotten love water? Why, did you recognize each other again? Hee hee. Gusuchiodi laughed. I naturally drank the forgotten love water and completely forgot about Xingzi. He also did the same. However, I was banished from the Immortal Palace to the Star-Lord Palace of the Yaopai Mountain. This time, Xingzi and I happened to meet during the Yaopai Mountain gathering held by the Star-Lord Palace. I really didn't expect. When I saw Xingzi, I felt very familiar with him. So, I took advantage of the collapse of the Yaotai Mountain's array and ran out. Who knew? Xingzi was the same as me. He also felt a rush of excitement. We even remembered the Broken Heart Mountain in our hearts. So, we came to the Broken Heart Mountain. Although we still don't know why we were forced to drink the forgotten love water, we've already guessed it. Speaking of this, Gusuchiodi glanced at Xiaohua, who was daydreaming, and said, We happened to meet your husband's master and followed him here. Who knew that we would actually meet you? I couldn't find any news about you in the Immortal Palace. I thought you were out on business. When I came to the hidden Immortal Continent, I didn't know anything. Who knew that you were actually imprisoned in the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal? From what you said just now, could it be that you, being punished by Heaven's punishment, has something to do with me? Nonsense! Bian smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for me sneaking into the Immortal Palace with you, how could you have met Luo Kong? If it wasn't for me leaking information, how could you have escaped from the Immortal Palace in advance? Your master was furious. Not only were you captured and forced to drink the forgotten love water, I naturally had to be punished too. Of course your family can protect you. But what about me? Although that person from the Emperor's Star Palace pleaded for mercy for me, but Heaven's face is hard to predict. In the end, I can't compare with you. Not only did you stay in the Immortal Palace to accept your punishment, you were also purposely arranged to go to the Star-Lord Palace. Isn't this just to let you meet Luo Kong? Why is my life so bitter? Hee, what's so bitter about you? Gusuchiodi smiled. Although you were punished by Heaven's punishment and lonely for thousands of years, didn't you still find your ideal husband? Look at the thunder-amplifying wood. Your thunderbolt technique must have reached an extremely high level, right? Oh, besides, you come out every year to get some fresh air. Isn't it also because someone tampered with it? What do you know? Tao Qing was helpless. You didn't go through the test of the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal. This isn't a place for people to stay. If it wasn't for the princess secretly giving it to me, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to stand it. Don't worry, don't worry. Gusuchiodi smiled. If I didn't know about you, I wouldn't have said anything. But since I know, I will definitely help you get out of this prison. Please don't. Tao Qing heard this and turned pale with fright. Clearly, she was frightened by Gusuchiodi's recklessness. She hurriedly said, You are already a criminal. Don't torture yourself. You only need to bring my news to that person from the Emperor's Star Palace. I'm sure she was also kept in the dark about me falling into the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal. She's the only one who can help me now. Got it, got it. Gusuchiodi covered her mouth and laughed. It's not easy for you to come out. You should have a private conversation with your little husband. Us masters need to discuss this. Tao Qing heard this and blushed. She glared fiercely at Gusuchiodi. Let's go, Jinren Xiao. Gusuchiodi urged when she saw Xiaohua not moving. Fujiwen, you take Tao Qing to the cave. Xiaohua's voice was a bit strange, as if he was speaking from his stomach. Jai Xingzi and Qiu Xianzi should leave too. I have some things to comprehend. -13. Chapter 3703. Yes, master! Fujiwen doesn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly bows and answers while pulling Tao Qing. Tao Qing stares at Xiaohua for a moment, and doesn't dare to speak loudly. Following Fujiwen out of the wooden house, she lowers her voice and asks, Husband, when did you acknowledge a master? This master of yours is very strange, ah. I just acknowledged him. Fujiwen says with a smile. However, I met him a few years ago. This thunder amplification wood was given to me by my master. I told you earlier. Oh, it's that Taoist cultivator you're especially grateful to? Tao Qing somewhat understands. But at that time when you told me, I didn't think he was very powerful. But now he's very strange. Fujiwen is somewhat puzzled. Yes, very powerful. Tao Qing looks at the cave and her eyebrows are already filled with spring. Her eyes overflow with light as she says in a low voice. Follow your master well. In the future, your cultivation will definitely surpass Luo Kong. It has to be said that girls side with outsiders. Just after meeting Gusuchiodi, Tao Qing tosses aside her former good friend's feelings and starts to plan for Fujiwen. She even compares her husband with Gusuchiodi's husband. Impossible, right? Fujiwen's heart is also burning with anger. But he still can't help but be surprised. Jai Xingzi is a Lake Yuanying stage senior. How can I be more powerful than him? Hee, don't worry. Tao Qing's small hand tightly grasps Fujiwen's hand. I may not be good at other things, but I'm absolutely accurate in judging people. I believe Gusuchiodi has already noticed the anomaly. As she speaks, Tao Qing's body unconsciously trembles and becomes somewhat hot, not to mention Fujiwen and Tao Qing who are in the cave fusing their souls and bodies. Gusuchiodi also hastily pulls Jai Xingzi and the two quietly float out of the wooden house. The two leave the wooden house and look at the night sky above with a face full of horror. Gusuchiodi transmits. This Xiaohua, which Taoist cultivator is he? Do you know his background? Even though Jai Xingzi transmits, he doesn't dare to speak loudly. He lowers his voice just like Tao Qing. I really don't know. I only heard old man Huda mention him and belittle him to be worthless. However, a few juniors also told me that this Xiaohua is close to Zhang Daoran and Sun Kong. In other words, because of Xiaohua, the two of them, who were originally at odds with each other, unexpectedly joined forces. This is also the main reason why I didn't obtain anything in this Yaohai gathering. Looking at the wooden house that was already a little far away, Jai Xingzi no longer dared to release his divine sense. Similarly, Gusuchiodi no longer dared to use her eye-clearing technique. Just a moment ago, the two of them sensed that something was wrong with Xiaohua's situation. They couldn't help but use their divine sense and eye-clearing techniques. What they saw was absolutely shocking. One of them saw the inscribed chains and the other saw the majestic void. How could they dare to stay in the wooden house? Fujiwen is so lucky! Gusuchiodi very abruptly gnashed her teeth and said, No, Xingzi, you have to become Xiaohua's sworn friend. Ah? Why? Jai Xingzi was very surprised. He didn't understand why Gusuchiodi would suddenly say this. You don't know! Gusuchiodi thought of something and hurriedly shook her head. You don't need to know the details. You just need to befriend Xiaohua. There's no need. After all, Jai Xingzi was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. Although he also understood that Xiaohua was very powerful, he still couldn't react for a moment. It's related to the secrets of the Immortal Palace. I dare not say too much. And I don't really understand either. Gusuchiodi also secretly transmitted her voice. You only need to know that Xiaohua is a Taoist cultivator, and also has the cultivation method of Confucianism. It seems, he's not inferior to me at all. Use your brain to think, if he attracts the attention of the Immortal Palace in the future, that's right. Zhai Xingzi slightly narrowed his eyes. If the Immortal Palace doesn't eliminate him, then, he's a hero of a region. He might even be, on par with that person. I should befriend him at this time. Xiaohua's most powerful is not only this. Gusuchiodi analyzed again. You and the Immortal Palace don't know about his current cultivation. This kind of concealment method, who can compare to him? At this point, Gusuchiodi's eyes brightened again. She said in a low voice, Zhai Xingzi, if I recommend Taoist Xiao to the Immortal Palace, will I be able to escape punishment? Zhai Xingzi heard this and his face changed greatly. He hurriedly stopped her. Please don't. Xiaohua claims to be a Taoist cultivator and just came out from Yaopai Mountain. Right now he's extremely conflicted with the Immortal Palace. If you mention this matter, it's fine if it succeeds. If it doesn't, it'll be harming Xiaohua. I'm just thinking. Gusuchiodi laughed. No matter what, he's our savior. I won't harm him. Then the two snuggled up to each other and looked at the starry sky. Sweet flowers bloomed and withered. As for Xiaohua, when the aura of the engraved law chains was produced, the Immortal Palace's law locked the entire wooden house. This was a rare opportunity. Xiaohua immediately retracted his aura and opened all the pores on his body. He tried his best to comprehend the influence of this law on space. Although Zhai Xingzi and the others could sense the terror of this law, they could only see the surface. And Xiaohua practiced the blood drop paradise, so he was naturally sensitive to this law. Moreover, he had suffered this kind of hardship several times. He always wanted to experience it for himself. Now that the harmless aura of the law spread out, Xiaohua immediately began to swim in this aura like a fish. When Xiaohua's mind entered the aura, his entire body was like one of the engraved law chains. Along with the order of the engraved law chains, a solemn aura was released. What was special was that some obscure things that Xiaohua had obtained from comprehending the heavenly Tao suddenly appeared in his memory. It pushed Xiaohua's comprehension deeper and deeper. Xiaohua's eyes were filled with vein patterns. Some of these vein patterns were curved, some were straight, some were extremely long and seemed to have no end. Some were extremely short and seemed to be invisible to the naked eye. The vein patterns rushed out of the entire space. They seemed to be disorderly and orderly. The vein patterns were like chains and also like blood droplets. They were constantly changing shape. At this moment, Xiaohua's mind also turned into a vein pattern and changed along with the other vein patterns. However, Xiaohua tried his best to follow the changes. Unfortunately, he couldn't keep up with the changes at all. He was always rejected by the vein patterns. Xiaohua chased for a moment and understood. He was far from understanding this law. How could he merge with it? As a result, he simply ignored it and let the vein patterns formed by his mind drift with the waves. It was also during this casual movement that Xiaohua's mind saw the faint fine lines on the vein patterns. These fine lines were more subtle than the vein patterns. These fine lines were like armor inscriptions and also like gold inscriptions. They were even more similar to green seal characters. However, when Xiaohua's mind carefully examined them, the fine lines disappeared. Xiaohua gained some understanding. He knew that his cultivation was insufficient at this moment. Now, the most important thing was to see these fine lines clearly. As a result, he focused his attention on these fine lines. When he saw a fine line appear, Xiaohua immediately followed it. When the fine line disappeared, he tirelessly pounced on another fine line. It was as if he was fishing, trying one after another. After an unknown amount of time, Xiaohua sensed that the number of fine lines he was seeing was increasing, and the fine lines were also becoming clearer. Seeing another fine line appear to his left, Xiaohua's attention immediately pounced over like a hungry tiger. Coincidentally, just as Xiaohua's attention shifted, another new fine line appeared midway. Xiaohua was completely caught off guard, and his entire mind immediately crashed into the fine line. Boom! Xiaohua only saw countless lights and shadows swaying in front of him. Some were fireballs flying, some were ghosts walking in the night, some were boundless waves, and some were brilliant stars. In an instant, Xiaohua's mind seemed to have turned into thousands of pieces and disappeared into these lights and shadows. At the same time, in another instant, all of his mind crashed into a ripple and appeared under the same starry sky. This? Xiaohua was greatly shocked, and he was extremely bewildered and astounded. Could it be that an enormous starry sky is hidden within every tiny fine line that can't be any smaller? Every seemingly infinite starry sky, the law is just a tiny, fine line. Just as he was thinking, the thousands of pieces of his mind turned into thousands of stars, each with different trajectories, each with different fluctuations, and flew towards Xiaohua. Boom! There was another burst of sound that seemed to split heaven and earth. All of the pieces of his mind condensed together. Suddenly, Xiaohua had a kind of understanding. The starry sky in front of him was so familiar. Wasn't it the starry sky of the heavenly Tao in his space? At the same time, Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand and a mirror appeared in front of him. Wasn't the thing condensed from the thousands of pieces of his mind Xiaohua? This Jade Archive. Xiaohua hurriedly looked around, but under his body, wasn't it his own space? It was just that this space had been baptized by the falling stone matrix at the Jade Pavilion conference. With the expansion of his divine sense and mind, it was now 10 times bigger than before. It was at least hundreds of thousands of li wide. See! Jade Archive. Xiaohua turned pale with fright. An inconceivable feeling rushed into his heart. How could a fine line of law in the wooden house near Heartbreak Mountain be the starry sky of his space below it? The biggest secret in his heart was actually blocked by a fine line of law. What is the connection between them? Is it the law? Is it the law? Is it the boundary? Or is it the heavenly Tao's Xiaohua? The more Jade Archive Xiaohua thought, the more confused he became. He looked up at the starry sky of the heavenly Tao. That incomparably huge heavenly Tao's Xiaohua was also ethereal and boundless. Forget it, my realm is not enough, my cultivation is not enough. It's difficult to find the reason. Jade Archive Xiaohua sighed, but then he smiled again. I'm afraid this time's comprehension will end here. However, peering into the mystery of the law is extremely useful for eyes cultivation. -13. Chapter 3704. With that thought, Jade Archive Xiaohua exits the space. His mind returns to its original position, and he opens his eyes. Seeing that the sky is bright, Xiaohua's heart moves. He pinches his fingers and does some calculations. He shakes his head slightly and walks out of the wooden house. Ha! Taoist Xiao, you are indeed powerful! The moment Xiaohua exits the wooden house, Jai Xingzi immediately notices. He flies over from the top of the mountain and cups his hands. Just a mere 100 days of meditation actually allowed Taoist Xiao to advance so much. If I did not see it with my own eyes, I would not dare to believe it. You flatter me, Xiaohua says with a smile. Even if I were to cultivate in seclusion for 100 days, I am afraid I would still not be able to catch up to Taoist Xiao's late nascent soul stage. I still have to continue working hard. Congratulations, Taoist Xiao! Gusuqiodi also flies over from afar. Following behind her is Fu Jiwen. Gusuqiodi's face is also filled with shock as she speaks from afar. Congratulations, Master, for coming out of seclusion! Fu Jiwen is overjoyed. He lands on the ground and bows. Same to you, same to you! Xiaohua cups his hands towards Gusuqiodi again. Looking at Fu Jiwen, he says with a smile. Master was actually in seclusion by accident and missed your good thing. Master is really embarrassed in his heart. Come, take out your heaven punishment prison crystal. Yes, master. Fu Jiwen didn't know what was going on, so he respectfully took out the wooden box. Xiaohua raised his hand, and the heaven's punishment prison crystal flew out of the wooden box. Xiaohua's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at the somewhat familiar inscription law chains. He opened his mouth, and 3 green lights that looked similar, but were actually completely different, flew out. They instantly turned into hundreds of tiny sword hairs, and fell into the inscription law gaps on the chains. Ah! Gusuchiodi did not expect Xiaohua to break the inscription law chains right after coming out of seclusion. Seeing the sword hairs enter, she heard the yells. Taoist Xiao, stop! It was a pity that Gusuchiodi's words were too late. The sword tip strangely landed in the gap between the engraving law. At this moment, the engraving law chain was overflowing. The sword tip abruptly pierced through and nailed the entire chain. Shwa! Just like how the engraving law chain collapsed that night, hundreds of engraving laws began to flicker. Kacha! A total of 9 different colored thunderbolts emerged from within the inscription rule, and then 9 dragon-shaped phantoms appeared from within the thunderbolts. The 9 dragons danced and condensed into an oval phantom, and a suffocating supreme aura immediately rushed out from the oval phantom, pushing everyone back by over 30 meters. Star Child, quick, quick, put me into your Qiankun bag! Gusuchiodi didn't have the time to explain in detail, she hastily shouted. When Zhai Xingzi saw Gusuchiodi's panicked expression, he knew that something bad was going to happen. He flung his emperor robe and took out his Qiankun bag, wanting to take Gusuchiodi into it. Unfortunately, Gusuchiodi's body only moved a few times, but she didn't fly up. Zhai Xingzi said anxiously, Qiu'er, your strength has surpassed mine. I can't use my Qiankun pouch to keep you. I'll do it. When Xiaohua saw this, although he didn't know why Gusuchiodi was panicking, he didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly waved his hand. Boom! The Kunlun mirror's light beam rushed out and landed on Gusuchiodi's body. Gusuchiodi thought for a moment, then withdrew her resistance, and her body disappeared along with the light beam. Clear sky mirror? Zhai Xingzi's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise, and he asked in surprise. Without waiting for Xiaohua's reply, a loud rumbling sound of thunder filled the air. In an instant, the area within a radius of 1,000 miles was filled with red clouds. A kind of black clouds that suffocated everyone was like an invisible wave that drowned everyone in a moment. An enormous distorted light that could split the heaven and earth appeared in front of everyone amidst the sound of thunder. Which daring cultivator dares to touch the Immortal Palace's inscription rule? An ethereal voice that was sometimes high and sometimes low, sometimes far and sometimes close sounded in everyone's ears. This. Xiaohua's face turned ashen, and his body trembled as if he was scared out of his wits. He bowed and said, I don't know, what is this? You don't know, yet you dare to touch it? Thunderclaps resounded, but the shocking thunder still couldn't cover up that voice. You Taoist cultivators are truly daring! Say, Senior! Xiaohua gathered his courage and bowed, saying, I thought this was a strange treasure sealed by a Confucian cultivator, so, even if it's a strange treasure, with your cultivation level, it's impossible for you to break it. Unless you can use the power of heaven and earth or a Taoist forbidden formation, that voice said coldly. This thing isn't for you to touch. Quickly return it to its original place. Today, I'm the one on duty. Since you're inexperienced and don't know the importance of this thing, I won't take your lives. If you try to break it in vain and get discovered by other enforcers, you'll definitely be struck by 10,000 lightning bolts, and your souls won't be able to reincarnate. After the voice finished speaking, another series of thunderclaps wreaked havoc within 1,000 miles. Soon after, the light shadow disappeared, the lightning disappeared, and even the red clouds dissipated. What does this mean? Xiaohua's brows furrowed as he looked at the scorching sun in the sky, as if he was thinking of something. Xiaohua's expression changed as he pondered. Cough, cough, Taoist Master Xiao. Zhai Xingzi was still inferior to Xiaohua. When the light shadow appeared, his entire nascent soul was imprisoned, and he couldn't use the mana in his body at all. He couldn't sense the chi of heaven and earth around him at all. After the person left, Jai Xingzi let out a long breath. He looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing quietly, and coughed twice. "Can you let Chior out first?" Xiao Hua nodded slightly. He waved his hand, and the Kunlun mirror appeared in his hand. With a flash of light, Gusuchiodi appeared in front of Jai Xingzi with a happy expression. Without waiting for Jai Xingzi to speak, Gusuchiodi asked first, "Taoist Master Xiao, is the Kunlun mirror in your hand?" "Yes." Xiao Hua nodded slightly. "How strange," Gusuchiodi said curiously. "The Immortal Palace spent 1,000,000 years searching for the Kunlun ruins, but they only found a small fragment of the Kunlun mirror in the buried Immortal continent. There were no other traces of the other parts. This fragment has no use at all. That's why the Immortal Emperor left the fragment in the buried Immortal continent. Who knew that you actually have an almost complete Kunlun mirror? It's really strange." Xiao Hua was shocked and forced a smile. "Since Fairy Chio knows, I hope you can keep this a secret for me." "Of course." Gusuchiodi smiled. "I still have something to ask of you. How would I dare to leak it?" "What is it?" Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. However, after a moment, Xiao Hua came back to his senses and smiled. "Fairy, are you saying that you want to hide in the Kunlun ruins? I have no problem with that. I just don't know if Taoist Jai Xingzi will be jealous." "Jealous?" Gusuchiodi was stunned. Then, she covered her mouth and laughed loudly as if she understood the story. She looked at the embarrassed Jai Xingzi and said, "Xingzi won't be jealous. Usually, I'll be outside with Xingzi and hide inside when something happens." "Oh, if you're afraid that Xingzi will be jealous, why don't you lend the Kunlun mirror to my Xingzi?" "TSK. You wish." Xiao Hua pursed his lips and immediately put away the Kunlun mirror. Gusuchiodi was just joking. She looked around and said softly, "The law enforcer came, right? He didn't make things difficult for you, right?" "No." Jai Xingzi shook his head. "I was so scared that I didn't dare to move. Only Taoist Xiao dealt with it." "It's fine." Xiao Hua explained the matter. "In the end," he said, "the law enforcer said unless you have the ancient Tao sex forbidden formation. It's quite strange. Could it be that he wants us to save Wuri Tan from the heaven punishment prison crystal?" "Master," Fu Jiwen said apologetically, "Disciple's humble wife's name is Bayan. That Wuri Tan is trying to hide her origin." Xiao Hua didn't find it strange. Gusuchiodi also smiled and said, "Also, I'm not called Gusuchioran, but Gusuchiodi. All the sinners of Star-Lord Palace have to change their last word to Ran when they enter Star-Lord Palace." Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and said with a bitter smile, "Chiu Xianzi, I don't even know your name. Is that okay?" "Hee hee." Gusuchiodi smiled and said, "Let's not talk about names. Taoist Zhao's intuition is right. This law enforcer, although I don't know who he is, he should be on good terms with the school of the Emperor Star. If I'm not wrong, he should be the one who showed mercy to Bayan." "School of the Emperor Star?" Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, "Where is that?" "This is a place of the Immortal Palace." Gusuchiodi shook her head and said, "However, I don't dare to reveal the secrets of the Immortal Palace. Let Fu Jiwen tell you what happened that night." "Yes." Fu Jiwen answered from the side and told Xiao Hua about what happened that night. Xiao Hua's heart was shaken as he listened. In just 2 hours, so many secrets had been revealed. It was really exciting. After Fu Jiwen finished, Xiao Hua looked at Gusuchiodi and asked with interest, "So, Bayan was punished because of Chiu Xianzi. Could it be that Chiu Xianzi doesn't want Bayan to be freed?" "Of course I want to." Gusuchiodi smiled bitterly and said, "But I'm just a small general of the Immortal Palace. I was lucky enough to be punished lightly because of my family's power. Didn't you see it too? Even someone as strong as the law enforcer doesn't dare to be too biased. How can I help Bayan to be freed?" Then how can this heavenly punishment prison crystal be broken? How long will it take to get out of internal trouble? What did the law enforcer mean by that sentence? Xiaohua asked step by step. Gusuchiodi's expression was calm, as if she had already thought about it. She said slowly, "Good question. I've thought about it carefully these days. If Bayan is to be freed, there are only two ways. The first is when the heavenly punishment prison crystal's punishment ends. The Jade Seal and Law will return to the Immortal Palace and Bayan will naturally be freed. The second is to rely on external forces. This external force has to be stronger than the Jade Seal and Law of the Immortal Palace." At this point, Gusuchiodi looked at Xiaohua again and said, "I'm sure you already know how powerful the Jade Seal and Law are when you tried to break the seal just now." "Indeed." Xiaohua nodded. "My current cultivation is not enough to break the seal." "Yes. Moreover, anyone who activates the Jade Seal and Law of the Immortal Palace can summon the Law Enforcer. We were lucky this time. If it wasn't for the Law Enforcer next time, we would be in trouble," Gusuchiodi continued. "However, just like what the Law Enforcer said, the heavenly punishment prison crystal was thrown on the hidden immortal continent. Other than human power, it might encounter other forces of heaven and earth and seal. If these forces can directly break the Jade Seal and Law chains inside the heavenly punishment prison crystal, then it belongs to the power of heaven. The Immortal Palace is known to punish on behalf of heaven. Since it can be broken with the power of heaven, then the punishment will be over. -13. Chapter 3705. Yes, that should be the case. Xiaohua nodded slightly. If we encounter an apocalypse, won't we just throw the heavenly punishment prison crystal in? The problem is, if the heavenly punishment prison crystal couldn't withstand the calamity, how could she withstand it? She might die the moment she comes out, right? Gusuchiodi reminded. Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat as he thought of his own space. In that space, whether it was the Jade Archive Xiaohua or the green-robed Xiaohua, they had the power to destroy mountains and tsunamis. This power was enough to destroy the heavenly punishment prison crystal. However, when Xiaohua thought of the fine lines on the inscription chains on the heaven's punishment prison crystal, his heart almost trembled. He didn't dare to imagine what kind of disaster it would be if the fine lines of the inscription chains passed through the starry sky of the space and rushed out of the space. Not to mention that his greatest secret would be exposed. Even those magic treasures and spiritual herbs of immeasurable value within the space would bring a calamity to him, right? While Xiaohua was pondering, Zhai Xingzi said, "Qiu, or didn't you say you're going to an ancient Taoist ruin in the next few days? Perhaps there'll be some opportunities there." Yes, that's right." Gusuchiodi's face lit up. "If there's a powerful restriction array inside, it'll definitely be able to resist the Immortal Emperor's Jade Seal. Bayan will definitely be able to escape from there." Gusuchiodi's definitely, left, and definitely right made Fujiwen's face light up with joy. "Taoist Zhai Xing, have you decided to follow me to that ancient restriction array?" Xiaohua returned to his senses and asked with a smile. Zhai Xingzi was already used to Xiaohua's tone and asked back, "When did I say I wasn't going? Not only Zhai Xingzi, but I also want to go." Gusuchiodi shouted eagerly. "Master!" Fujiwen's tone was somewhat pleading. Needless to say, he also wanted Xiaohua to bring him along. "Your cultivation is insufficient. If you go, it'll be dangerous." Xiaohua denied. "You should go to Black Wind Ridge first. You're spoiling your disciple too much." Zhai Xingzi smiled. "You said that Xueping was only at Foundation Establishment. Fujiwen is stronger than Xueping, right? If Xueping can go, why can't Fujiwen? Xueping's life was important, but Fujiwen's life wasn't. Besides, if Fujiwen doesn't go, who's going to bring the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal?" Xiaohua frowned slightly. What Zhai Xingzi said wasn't wrong. The ancient forbidden formation was indeed dangerous, but it was also a fortuitous encounter. Such a rare experience was absolutely important to Fujiwen. Don't you have the Kunlun mirror? Gusuchiodi said with a smile. If things go south, you can just take Fujiwen into the Kunlun ruins. And this Shao will consider it again. Xiaohua nodded slightly. Jai Xingzi looks at Xiaohua's old hen-like appearance and says with a smile, Jinren Xiao, I'm afraid you don't have much time to think. Previously, you said that you would arrive at Jingzhou after a month or so. Now, half a year has almost passed and we still haven't moved. Only half an hour. This Shao will consolidate my previous comprehension. Xiaohua thought for a moment, and then landed on the mountain peak. He sat down cross-legged and formed a seal with both hands. Immediately, the wind and clouds on the mountain peak changed and yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered. Gusuchiodi was surprised and asked, Xingzi, what is Jinren Xiao doing? Jai Xingzi could not see the seal in Xiaohua's hand and shook his head slightly. I don't understand either, but didn't you say? Consolidate your realm. Who would believe that? Gusuchiodi snorted coldly. I realize that this Xiaohua is very honest sometimes, but he's also very cunning at other times. Didn't the Confucian cultivators always say that there are no perfect people? Such a person is reassuring, Jai Xingzi said with a smile. Of course, Xiaohua was not consolidating his comprehension. He had just comprehended the order, and he could not help but feel ambitious. He wanted to try the karma seal that he could not control previously. Looking at Xiaohua sitting cross-legged and forming a seal with both hands, who knows how long he had been planning in his heart. As the yuan qi of heaven and earth gathered, light and shadow began to appear in front of Xiaohua's eyes. Then, an incomparably strange power began to be born from the seal and madly rushed into Xiaohua's body. Xiaohua knew that this was the backlash of the seal, so he naturally did not dare to be careless. His body's imbuing body technique was activated, and those 13,200 small dots also madly absorbed the yuan qi of heaven and earth. In an instant, a huge storm was born with Xiaohua as the starting point and gradually expanded. Shock appeared on Jai Xingzi and Gusuchiodi's faces. They looked at each other and turned into rainbows. Before they flew away, the two of them did not forget to bring Fujiwen, who was at a loss, along with them. Behind the three of them, the wooden house that Fujiwen built was swept up into the sky like breaking dry weeds and rotten wood. The wooden planks were instantly torn into pieces. The storm grew extremely fast. Jai Xingzi and the other two flew out 3,000 feet and stood in midair. The storm behind them had already enveloped several thousand feet. Jai Xingzi released his divine perception and felt the chaotic yuan qi of heaven and earth in the surroundings. Just as he was about to send his divine perception into the storm, a sharp pain like a knife cut off a wisp of divine perception. See! Jai Xingzi's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly withdrew his divine perception and wanted to say something. It was also at this moment. Wang wang! A strange sound came from the center of the storm. No matter if it was Jai Xingzi or Gusuchiodi, their Naiwan palace was greatly shaken. A kind of dizziness appeared, and before they could activate their divine ability to resist, swoosh! The entire several thousand feet wide storm suddenly stopped. The time of stopping was extremely short, and in the blink of an eye, all of the storm abruptly shrunk back. A powerful suction force pulled the three of them into the storm. Gusuchiodi was a great grandmaster who was at the lower stage of the 5th grade of essence energy. When had she ever been in such a difficult situation? Her entire body immediately glowed as she tried her best to resist. However, just as her true qi was generated, the suction force suddenly reversed and turned into a pushing force. Boom! The storm actually collapsed from the inside out. Gusuchiodi was caught unprepared, and her figure flew very inelegantly into the sky. Sigh! The storm gradually calmed down. The mountain peak had already changed. Xiaohua, who had already changed into a Taoist robe, flew out with a strange expression. Originally, he wanted to rush into the hand of Karma's spell with the remnants of the order that he had just comprehended. Unfortunately, his cultivation was still insufficient, and he still couldn't use this spell. However, Xiaohua didn't come out empty-handed. Just as the spell failed, Xiaohua was seized by a sudden impulse and realized that Fu Jiwen and the others had followed him into the ancient forbidden array. It was a frightening but not dangerous ending. As for the Heaven's Punishment Prison Crystal, Xiaohua didn't sense it at all. Taoist Xiao. Seeing such a huge formation, Zhai Xingzi called out, "Fellow Taoist," with a bit of embarrassment. Seeing Xiaohua fly out safely, he asked loudly, "Are you injured?" "Hee, Taoist comprehension is really not bad. You gained something in just a moment," Gusuchiodi said with a smile. "And you even destroyed Fu Jiwen's wooden house while you were at it." Hee. Xiaohua also said with a smile. "I'm fine. It's just that I was thinking of something and couldn't control my magic power. That's why I failed. Since the wooden house is already gone, that's a sign for Fu Jiwen to follow me. This is the will of the heavens." "Many thanks, Master." Hearing this, Fu Jiwen was overjoyed. He bowed and said, "Let's go." Xiaohua flicked his sleeves and helped Fu Jiwen up. He looked into the distance and said, "I didn't expect that we would stay here for so long. I'm afraid that Xue Ping is already waiting anxiously in Jingzhou." "Jingzhou?" Zhai Xingzi looked at Xiaohua. He couldn't help but laugh. He said with a low voice, "Taoist Xiao, the direction of Jingzhou is behind you." "Oh," Xiaohua said with a smile. "I was just lamenting about the Buddhist sect of the single Liang country. That—" Gusuchiodi covered her mouth and laughed. Without holding back, she pointed it out. "The single Liang country is to your left. Go, go, go." Xiaohua flicked his sleeves. "I just want to see the sunset. Is that not enough? If I don't go now, when will I go?" Seeing that Xiaohua was about to turn into a rainbow, Zhai Xingzi hurriedly called out, "Taoist Xiao, don't be anxious. I have a flying boat here." Xiaohua helplessly glared at Zhai Xingzi. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" "That—" Zhai Xingzi laughed in his heart. He didn't show it on his face. "Taoist Xiao is impatient. I'm not as good as you. Hurry up." Xiaohua waved his hand to hide his awkwardness. "There's an ancient forbidden formation waiting for us to enter. Taoist Xiao, aren't you happy?" Hee. Zhai Xingzi took out the flying boat while laughing. "It's precisely because it's an ancient forbidden formation that we can't be anxious." Previously, when I explored dangerous places with Taoist Xiao, which time didn't we prepare for more than 10 years? Which time didn't we use up a lot of energy? Now, in Taoist Xiao's mouth, this ancient forbidden formation is as easy as playing house. My luck is good. Xiaohua rubbed his nose. He inexplicably thought of Xian and the ancient forbidden formation at the bottom of the Saint River. "Let's go. Let's see how Xue Ping and the rest are preparing." Zhai Xingzi smiled as he controlled the flying boat. "If they aren't prepared, I won't try my luck with Taoist Xiao." Xue Ping and the rest were naturally well prepared, especially Xue Ping. In order to enter the forbidden formation and break through his bottleneck, he had started preparing more than 10 years ago. However, as time passed, the more information Xue Ping received, the less confident he became. The forbidden formation in the wilderness of Jingzhou had long exceeded his ability. Later on, Xue Ping realized that he couldn't easily break through the formation by himself. Thus, he began to invite experts to help him. Back then, when Xue Ping met Xiaohua and saw Xiaohua's great strength, he immediately thought of the forbidden formation. Thus, he invited him. Just like Xue Ping's predicament, the cultivators Xue Ping invited naturally wanted to explore as well. However, after exploring for a while, all of them shrunk their necks back. They knew that with their strength, they would most likely die if they entered. Without powerful assistance, none of them dared to enter. However, what was Xue Ping's cultivation? How powerful could the cultivators he invited be? Moreover, these Taoist cultivators who knew the news kept it a secret and did not dare to say too much. Therefore, until today, everyone had been looking forward to it for half a year. When they saw the flying ship flying over from afar and 2 extraordinarily powerful divine senses swept over, their hearts were finally at ease. They all flew up into the air and waited respectfully. -13. Chapter 3706. Shui Ping and the others watched Xiaohua and Zhai Xingzi disembark from the flying boat. Xiaohua was just a newly famous nascent soul cultivator, but Zhai Xingzi's reputation was well known in the hidden Immortal continent, especially when he won the last rare treasure in the Jade Pavilion gathering. His emperor's outfit was particularly eye-catching. As soon as he flew out of the flying boat, there were immediately cultivators who came to their senses and came forward to greet him with joy. Xiaohua, on the other hand, had long been placed in second place by them. Xiaohua didn't care about this. He bowed to the cultivators facing him, but in reality, he waved his hand at the cultivators who had been paying attention to Zhai Xingzi. Gusiqiudi and Fu Jiwen were the last to disembark. Fu Jiwen's cultivation was on par with Shui Ping and the rest, while Gusiqiudi concealed her cultivation. She appeared to be around the 3rd grade of essence force and was dressed in a Taoist robe. Zhai Xingzi looked at her with concern from time to time, and the cultivators immediately understood. Although they weren't as respectful as Zhai Xingzi, they were more respectful than Xiaohua. Shui Ping and the other cultivators were happy, but Zhai Xingzi wasn't. Looking at the 12 cultivators' crooked cultivation, he almost curled his lips. Normally, Zhai Xingzi would have reprimanded them, but seeing Xiaohua's indifference, Zhai Xingzi couldn't say anything. After all, he was invited by Xiaohua. "You've waited for a long time. Are there only these few cultivators?" Although Zhai Xingzi was dissatisfied, he still asked according to the discussion on the flying boat. "Senior, please no!" Shui Ping's cultivation wasn't the highest, but he was the first to initiate, and knew that Zhai Xingzi was invited by Xiaohua. He hurriedly bowed and said, "There were originally 15 people, but when we discussed waiting, they felt that this trip was too dangerous, and they didn't know Senior Xiao well, so they chose to withdraw. The remaining fellow Taoists are very confident in Senior Xiao. Now that Senior has joined this trip..." "My ass!" Zhai Xingzi reprimanded Shui Ping without holding back. He pointed at the dozen cultivators who were only at the 3rd grade of essence force and said, "What do you think this ancient forbidden formation is? Even I don't dare to recklessly enter it. With your cultivation, you're just going to die." "Yes, this junior understands." Shui Ping smiled apologetically, knowing that Zhai Xingzi was speaking the truth. He replied, "I was the one who found the clues to the ancient forbidden array in the beginning. I've already discussed it for a long time, and I feel that, if we don't enter, we'll feel indignant. However, if we enter, we don't have any confidence at all. Now that Senior Xiao and Senior Zhai Xing are here, I feel that this is a great opportunity. We juniors can't compare to Senior, and we have very few choices. Under the pressure of the Confucian cultivators, we juniors have no choice but to risk our lives." Hearing Shui Ping's pitiful words, the dozen or so cultivators' faces were also filled with unwillingness. Zhai Xingzi sighed and said, "When Taoist Master Xiao mentioned this to me, I had already thought about it. Your idea is indeed correct. You want to use this ancient forbidden formation to raise your cultivation base, especially to obtain some fortuitous encounters from within. However, there were many ways to break through bottlenecks. It was possible to do so without relying on restrictive arrays. According to what this old man knows, there are a few hidden danger zones near Jing province. If you are willing, this old man can tell you the locations and you can go there to search for opportunities." "That's right," Xiaohua chimed in from the side. "If you feel that you won't be able to gain much from those dangerous places, this old man can give each of you a usable magic treasure. Even if you return empty-handed from those places, you can still use those dangerous places to refine magic treasures." This, Shui Ping was somewhat surprised, and he also felt some regret. When he met Xiaohua in the Danliang state, Shui Ping was very assured of Xiaohua because the state preceptor of the Danliang state was present. Although he didn't tell Xiaohua all the information he had, he still flaunted some details to Xiaohua. However, he didn't expect how Xiaohua would deal with it. Would he not want them to enter the forbidden area? Seeing Xue Ping's expression, Xiaohua smiled and said, "Of course, this is only this old man's consideration. The specific choice will be up to you. After all, this ancient forbidden array was found by you all with great difficulty. This old man and the others have no reason to stop you from entering." Phew! Xue Ping let out a long sigh and turned to look at the other cultivators. This news was rather sudden, so the cultivators weren't prepared at all. Furthermore, this choice was extremely difficult. Xue Ping thought for a moment, looked at the other cultivators' troubled expressions, and asked respectfully, "Seniors, this matter is of great importance. Would you allow us to discuss it further?" "It's fine." Xiaohua smiled and said, "Feel free to discuss it. It doesn't matter if it's 1 day or 10 days. It's fine as long as there's a result." "Thank you, Senior." Xue Ping bowed and raised his hand. This junior didn't expect that Senior Xiao would be able to invite Senior Jiaxing, so the meditation room wasn't prepared enough. This junior would get someone to clean it up. "All right, go ahead." Xiaohua waved his hand. Actually, this old man didn't consider it thoroughly before. "On the way here, I heard fellow Taoist Jiaxing explain the dangers inside, so we made this decision at the last minute. Sorry for making things difficult for you." No, this is also Senior's consideration for us. This junior and the others understand very well." Xue Ping hurriedly waved his hand. Facing Xiaohua, who even his own state preceptor had to treat with respect, Xue Ping really couldn't bear any complaints. Faced with the temptation of the restriction array, the choice was truly difficult. Xue Ping and the others understood very well that this restriction array was naturally extremely dangerous. If they weren't careful, they would die, but the benefits were also great. Not to mention that traveling between life and death was very beneficial to one's temperament, Tao foundation, and so on. Even if they obtained a damaged cultivation technique or an ancient Dharma artifact from the ancient restriction array, it would immediately allow their cultivation to enter another realm. Now that the Tao cultivation techniques of the hidden immortal continent had already been annihilated, Dharma artifacts, Dharma treasures, and so on were ordinary and mediocre. Any item from the restriction array would cause a sensation if taken out. Xue Ping and the others didn't dare to pin their hopes on a great opportunity like Xiaohua and the others. They only needed a little from Xiaohua and Jiaxing, and it would be enough for them to roam the hidden immortal continent freely. This was also the reason why they had always coveted the ancient restriction array even though they knew it was dangerous. Xiaohua and Jiaxing didn't seem to be in a hurry. They each occupied a quiet room. Fu Jiwen waited in front of Xiaohua's room while the Tsuchioti cultivated in Jiaxing's room. She actually seemed to have thrown the matter of Xue Ping and the others to the back of her mind. After more than 3 days, Xue Ping and the others finally came to a decision. It wasn't out of Jiaxing's expectations. 8 of Xue Ping's cultivators chose to follow Xiaohua and the others into the restriction array, while the other 5 chose to withdraw. Jiaxing and Xiaohua didn't go back on their words. They gave each of them a Dharma artifact and jade eye. The 5 cultivators were filled with joy as they left together. Presumably, they were going to travel to another dangerous place. "All right, since you've chosen to enter the restriction array with me, then I'll have to make it clear." Jiaxing and Xiaohua sat at the head of the cave abode that Xue Ping and the others had temporarily opened up. Looking at the 8 cultivators standing before them, Jiaxing was the first to speak. "Taoist Master Xiao and I will do our best to guarantee your safety. However, if you encounter a place that even we can't protect ourselves, we won't have the time to fend for ourselves." "Yes, we understand," Xue Ping and the others said respectfully. "We're already extremely grateful to be able to follow the 2 seniors into the restriction array and fulfill our wish. Also," Xiaohua added, "if the restriction array is divided into a few sections, then everyone should act according to your abilities. If there's some opportunity, then hurry up and leave. Don't lose your lives over there." Yes, we understand," Xue Ping and the others replied again. However, they were also unconvinced. After all, Fu Jiwen, who was behind Xiaohua, seemed to be less than a third-grade essence force cultivator. Since Fuji Wen could enter, why couldn't they? After Zhai Xingzi gave a few more instructions, Xue Ping respectfully took out a few jade eyes from his bosom and handed them over. He said, "This is the information we have gathered over the past dozen years, regarding the Misty Mountain Maze Formation. Please take a look." Misty Mountain Maze Formation? Zhai Xing's face revealed a shocked expression. He waved his hand and took the jade eyes. He asked in a low voice, "Xue Ping, are you sure this is the Misty Mountain Maze Formation? I seem to have heard that the Misty Mountain Maze Formation is at Yongzhou's Misty Mountain." "All right, I'll let you know." Xue Ping's face revealed a trace of pride. He cupped his hands and said, "To tell you the truth, we didn't know this was the famous Misty Mountain Maze Formation. We only thought it was an ordinary ruin. However, as we investigated further and searched for clues around the maze formation, we didn't dare to believe that the Misty Mountain Maze Formation, which was far away in Yongzhou, could be in Jingzhou. If it's really the Misty Mountain Maze Formation, then it's no wonder that countless Taoist cultivators have been searching for this maze formation in Yongzhou's Misty Mountain all these years. It's obvious that it's impossible to find it." Zhai Xing sighed. "Even back then, I went to Misty Mountain and returned empty-handed. Actually, it's also a coincidence." Xue Ping smiled apologetically. "When we first met Senior Xiao, we weren't sure, so we didn't dare to mention it to you. Later on, we left Yuzhou, and received the help of a fellow Taoist named Dao Qing. Only then did we confirm that this ruin is the Misty Mountain Maze Formation." "Dao Cheng?" Zhai Xing looked up at the 8 people before him and smiled. "Why isn't he here? I'm afraid Dao Qing isn't fated to meet him." A cultivator beside Xue Ping said, "Before you two came, he felt that the ruin was too dangerous and left early." "What a pity!" Zhai Xing looked at the jade eyes in his hand and thought for a moment before handing it to Xiao Hua. "Taoist Xiao, you should take a look first. There's no need to look at the details in the jade eyes for now." Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. "Exalted Sun Kong and Zhang Daoran haven't come yet. When they're all here, we'll discuss it together." "What?" Xiao Hua's words were no different from a stone thrown into a pond. Xue Ping and the others were stunned again. "Senior Xiao, you said that there are more seniors coming?" 13. You're tuning into the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.